Word document if you'd like, or you can share a PowerPoint presentation if you would like, whatever way works best for you. And whatever you present, whether it be a PowerPoint or whether it be a Word doc, the second aspect is to upload that to Collaborate so I can give you some formal feedback on that, on your plan, so that you can move forward to write your long essay, which is due this Sunday at midnight. So there were kind of 4 components to the assessment. Basically, choose a question, convert it into a thesis statement, create some parameters or a scoping statement or a type of map. Haley, you've got a question?
Sorry, just quickly, you know how the 4th part of it was like the references and like the resources?
Yeah.
When we present that, do we have to go into detail about what we're picking from those, or can we just have them listed like you did in the video?
Yeah. I might kind of ask you if like you've chosen any that kind of the reasoning behind that.
Okay.
Like if you've chosen one specifically because you'll think it will be helpful. But no, if you can just show them, that would be great.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
As well. Yeah, I don't think you need to read them all out and whatnot. Just let me know that you've got them there. And particularly, I'll be able to see them, whatever you upload, and give you feedback on them and maybe suggest some others if that kind of will be helpful or not. So yeah, that was the 4th component that Haley mentioned, bibliography. And the 3rd component was create some kind of rudimentary beginning list of arguments or topics that you're going to be looking at. Kind of 4 basic components. Sometimes the map and the scoping statement and the thesis mold together. Sometimes they don't, but we're looking for a kind of a rough sketch here because it's the beginning of week 3. You've only had 2 and a bit weeks to kind of develop some starting for your thesis statement. This is always the trouble with block mode, particularly in literary studies, is you always are writing your essays while you're reading the books, which is problematic. But let's go ahead and start. And 3 people have asked to go early, Camille, Maddie, and Chelsea. And if anyone else would like to kind of jump in here, you please do. And if not, I'll just start going down alphabetically.
I wouldn't mind going early as well, if that's possible.
Okay, I'll put you down, Haley, after Chelsea.
Awesome, thank you. Same too, if you could.
Who is that?
Kaylee.
Hey, Kaylee. Okay. What we might do is just do it democratically in the sense that I'll just keep asking people who would like to go next, and I'll write your names down and kind of record them. And if we run out, I'll kind of seek out anyone that's kind of hasn't gone and ask them to go. So maybe we won't go in alphabetical order. We'll go in a type of Zoom democracy.
I wouldn't mind going after as well, like whoever was just said. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Okay. Yep. All right. Cool bananas. And for those of you who are very patient and appreciative and kind of can just wait around, that would be good as well. All right. So Camille, Maddie, Chelsea, who would like to start the ball rolling on our presentations?
I will if you guys are happy for me to go first.
Yeah, some context for everyone that's rocking on in. Maddie needs to go and play soccer tonight. She's got a grand final and she's going to win. Would you like to share the screen or just read your
I'll share my screen because I've done a PowerPoint.
Oh, great. You should just be able to go and share screen, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Okay. All right, can everybody see that now?
Yep, I can see it.
Cool. So obviously this is my essay plan and presentation. Oh, sorry, I'm not very good at screen.
It's very nice. It's very almost.
Oh, thanks. So the question that I chose for my essay was the 4th question. So I'll just read it out. Wuthering Heights predominantly displays romantic narrative elements, including elements of the Gothic genre. Discuss whether this is an accurate description of the novel, and you needed to read the whole novel in order to do this question, which I have.
Right.
Which is good. So this is my thesis statement. In this paper, I will argue that Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights embodies an extremely abstract romantic narrative in order to frame the transcendental realm of this Gothic novel as one with mythic and supernatural creatures such as ghosts and demons. In conjunction with these beings, death plays a central role in the novel, with many characters viewing death as a possible respite to their suffering on Earth. Although extremely romantic, Bronte does, however, incorporate aspects of realism into her novel. These are shown through the depiction of common Victorian social problems of the 19th century, such as marriage and class. And overall, although these aspects of realism are used by Bronte, this novel displays predominantly romantic narrative aspects. So this will be my kind of breakdown of what I will be looking at in my essay. So the first part of the essay will explore how Bronte uses the Gothic supernatural creatures such as ghosts, demons, and there's a lot of other ones mentioned too, like vampires and witches, as a romantic tool in order to dramatize the story as one of an abstract and transcendental realm. I'll argue that Bronte compares characters in the novel such as Heathcliff to a demon or vampire in order to display him as the Byronic villain of the story. The second part of my essay will explore how death is used by Bronte as a romantic theme in Wuthering Heights. And I'll argue that death is either viewed as a punishment for earthly wrongdoing or a merciful release from the extreme pain and suffering of the lives of some of the characters in the novel. The third part of the essay will explain that although extremely romantic in the novel, Bronte does, however, incorporate aspects of realism as a form of social commentary of the world of England in the 19th century. And I will argue that Bronte criticises aspects of society such as marriage and class in her writing. I would have liked to go into a little bit more detail about this in particular, but obviously time won't allow me to go into full detail about some of those things. Time will not allow me to go into full detail about Lord Byron or the history of the Byronic hero in other narrative works, but I will go through it briefly in that first argument. And time won't allow me to obviously talk about some of the other realist aspects of the 19th century in which Bronte comments on, such as domestic violence and socioeconomic status. This is my first argument. So Bronte's use of supernatural creatures provides the reader insight into the Gothic realm of Wuthering Heights. And some evidence that I've gathered, obviously, throughout the entire text of Wuthering Heights, I found that Heathcliff was compared to evil creatures such as a demon and vampire. And I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but these key passages here in this first kind of little paragraph are all quotes from the novel where Heathcliff is compared to an evil creature. So I could have gone on and on and on with little quotes about that, but these are just some that I've got. So he's a fierceless, pitiless wolfish man, evil beast, devil, and so on. My second lot of evidence is when Mr. Lockwood sees the ghost of Catherine at Wuthering Heights at the beginning of the novel. And my third lot of evidence is when multiple people at the end of Wuthering Heights say that they have sighted the ghosts of Heathcliff and Catherine. And yeah, these quotes, these key passages at the end here is the first one here is when Mr. Lockwood wakes up and sees the ghost of Catherine. And then these ones here are quotes about the young boy sighting Catherine and Heathcliff at the end, and Nellie narrating that country people believe that they've seen Heathcliff as a ghost, obviously. So my next argument is that death plays a major role in Wuthering Heights as both a romantic and Gothic element, which with characters believing it is a hideous punishment for sin or a merciful release from pain and suffering. So my evidence that I've got is the novel's tragic theme begins with death and ends with death. So it begins with death, the death of Mr. Earnshaw at the beginning of the novel, and ends with the death of Heathcliff at the end of the novel. And in between these two deaths, there are 9 other deaths in the story. My second lot of evidence is the death of Catherine and the fact that Heathcliff wants to die to be relieved from his pain and loss of her death. And my third lot of evidence, Catherine foreshadows her death and her life after death. So obviously I've got the volumes and the chapters and the pages of those ones there. So these key passages here are Catherine, sorry, I've got this one, the bottom one here is Catherine explaining to Nellie a dream that she had that foreshadows her death. And these quotes here are all, some of them are about Heathcliff to Catherine about death, Nellie describing Edgar after the death of Catherine, and Heathcliff on discovering Catherine dead. So the same thing here. I could have gone on and on with quotes about death throughout the novel, but these are just some of the ones that I've chosen. And my third argument is, although extremely romantic, Bronte incorporates aspects of realism as a social commentary of issues in the 19th century society, such as marriage and class. So my evidence for this argument is the issues of class and marriage raised when Catherine refuses to admit her love for Heathcliff, and basically refusal of marriage of him through the fear of losing her class status. So that coincides with this passage here where she says she's got no more business to marry Edgar Linton, that she has to be in heaven, but basically she won't marry Heathcliff because it will ultimately degrade her and she will end up with nothing. And my second lot of evidence is Catherine Jr. So being forced into marrying Linton Heathcliff in order for Heathcliff to have control over their estate and money, ultimately getting his revenge on that family. So he's basically forcing her to marry him and holding her hostage. So I've got some quotes here from Linton Heathcliff to Catherine, where he basically says his life is in her hands. And this one here is Linton to Nellie and Catherine, where he basically says that Heathcliff is going to force them to marry and hold her hostage, basically. And this is my bibliography.
It's pretty thorough, Maddie. It's pretty impressive.
Oh, thank you. It did take me a while to find all those quotes.
No, I meant the close readings of the novel as, the quotes themselves. Yeah, sorry. Yes, it looks like you've gone through the novel. Can I ask, did you read it online or did you have a copy?
Oh, no, I had a hard copy. Thank goodness, because I just could not read a whole novel on my computer like that. I don't think. Because I went through and highlighted all the quotes that I wanted, because no one else is going to read it, so I don't care if it's got highlight marks in it.
Yeah. Well, it's yours forever, I guess. Hopefully, you keep a hold of it. That was a great presentation. How are you feeling about it? You feeling confident that you're going to write a good essay?
I think so. Like I felt doing this made me feel a lot better about having to go and write it. I feel like now I've got kind of a structure to follow rather than just trying to make it up on the spot. So yeah, don't feel too bad.
One closing suggestion I can give you, and I'll give you this in the feedback, is if you've got too much to work with and the word count's going over, you might want to select from those 3 sections that you've chosen to focus on, those 3 topics, and think perhaps which 2 work best to kind of answer the question, and perhaps which one I can do without. But yeah, it looks really good, and I'm looking forward to reading the essay. But please do upload it to the Collaborate so I can give you some formal feedback. But
I've uploaded it already.
Oh, great, great. Thanks, Maddie. That was excellent.
Thank
maybe
you very
we'll give you
much.
a round of applause. A little
Thanks,
clap.
everyone. Thanks for listening.
I know the clap's pretty cheesy by now. You've seen those little digital claps for however long, but yeah, that was great. Good luck with the soccer. Let us know.
Thank you.
Let us know on Wednesday what happens. If it's a final, bring along the trophy.
Oh yeah, if we get one, I will.
Yeah, well, hopefully you will. Thanks, Maddie.
Thanks very much.
Camille or Chelsea, who would like to go next? Camille, would you like to go?
Sure thing. Just bear with me while I get my presentation going. Like, I don't know how to do it. Can you guys see the whole presentation, or is it presenter view?
Camille has started sharing screen. It should come here in a moment, I think, hopefully.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, what's going on? Is anyone else seeing Camille's presentation? It could just be me.
No,
Yeah,
I
I'm
can't
not
see
seeing
it.
anything. Sorry.
Do you want to try it again? It's just it may not have kind of loaded for some silly reason.
Yeah. How about now?
Ah, no.
Yeah,
What's
I guess it's not gonna work. That's okay.
no? What's
I just want
going?
you
What's
to see
going
my
on?
notes, but
Is that PowerPoint?
yeah, it is. It's okay. I'll just
Hold on. When you go to your share screen, are you selecting the right little box or something?
yeah. I think the issue is like because I don't want you guys to see presenter view because that's kind of lame and like that has my notes.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
I guess that's what we'll have to do. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, we can see it now. I think there's a way you can do it, but I think the trouble is you have to lose the presenter view.
Yeah.
Because you can use
well.
slideshow at the top, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry guys. Hopefully that's kind of clear enough for you guys to see.
Yeah,
But
if this humbles you a little bit, I gave like about 5 or 6 whole sessions in poetry and poetics, and none of the students told me that I was presenting in presenter screen, and that was
that's a bit rough.
yeah. Go for it, Camille.
All right, so I've chosen to go my own way a bit and create my own question, which is romantic wildness offers a realistic means of understanding nature and recognizing humanity's role in it. So to what extent does Austen portray wildness in Pride and Prejudice, and how does it differ from Bronte's wildness in Wuthering Heights? So my thesis, I've got 2 options I'm kind of working on at the moment. The first is the romantic wildness across both texts must be tamed in order to achieve civility. Austen encourages and celebrates this, whereas Bronte condemns it as unnatural conformity. And sort of a similar thesis, but more developed, I guess, is a sense of untamed and animalistic wildness pervades the characters and environment of Wuthering Heights. Through wildness, Bronte gives her characters the strength and energy to express their humanity, whereas Austen's Pride and Prejudice warns against high animal spirits and suggests wildness must be tamed, especially for women, to be seen as well-bred and stuff like that. You know, having good manners and being well-bred. So the first part of the essay will be an exploration of wild and natural women across the text. Being natural or being a natural woman is kind of attributed to this desirable quality of a civilized woman. The society seems to believe that the natural delicacy of a woman is like what her most natural nature is. But we know that the requirements of that, like being an accomplished woman, couldn't be more artificial. So in this exploration, I'll probably focus mostly on characters such as Catherine Earnshaw and Elizabeth Bennet and Lydia Bennet. But in the second part of the essay, I'm going to address how wildness is attributed to male characters. So here I'm going to explore Wickham and Heathcliff, so the wild romantic characters versus more restrained gentry characters like Mr. Darcy and Edgar Linton. So drawing on these connections, I'm going to highlight how Bronte encourages the wild, passionate expression of passion and male emotion, whereas Austen doesn't. And then the final part of the essay, I'm going to look at how there's different representations of environment, so the wild versus the tamed environment and how they kind of influence the characters in those settings. I'd like to talk more about Kathy Linton, Nellie Dean, and other animal symbolism in Wuthering Heights, but I'm not going to have time for that. And same with more of the other women from Pride and Prejudice, unfortunately. Anyway, my arguments, the first is that Austen condemns wild women and instead celebrates those with natural elegance and delicacy. Bronte challenges what it means to be natural, be a natural woman, and suggests that what appears natural is actually superficial. So here I'm going to look at Catherine Earnshaw quite specifically, especially in that transition from living in the Heights, being that wild child, to when she went to the Grange and she became this very sophisticated, very almost domesticated woman. And I'll also look at when Catherine dies, how she has this wild illness and she longs to be back at the Heights, and she sort of wants to go back to her more natural state of being wild. And I think in that way, Austen's really encouraging and celebrating wildness and saying, that's what she really is. In contrast, I'm going to look at Lydia from Pride and Prejudice and how she's totally condemned for being wild. She's described as untamed, unabashed, wild, noisy, and fearless. And when she runs off with Wickham, Elizabeth actually calls it too natural. So it's like she's too animalistic, too wild. And that's just not okay in that civilized society. Very much contrasting to Jane's natural delicacy and Elizabeth's much more acceptable wildness. So you have that very much contrast there. For the second argument, I'm going to look at the men. We have Wickham, wild and evil. He's a lot more passionate and affectionate, and he kind of hunts women like prey. So he's very much animalistic, and he's not well bred, which very much contrasts to Mr. Darcy, who's very gentlemanly, very well bred, very rational and realistic and restrained. And then same thing, kind of this dichotomous sense of, wild man versus gentleman man is established in Wuthering Heights too, with Edgar Linton, who's more weak and needs servants and guns to challenge Heathcliff. And then we have, that wild, savage catharsis of Heathcliff when Catherine dies. And I think, again, here, Bronte's really celebrating that wildness, whereas Austen condemns it. And then finally, the idea of that wild nature versus tame nature. So the contrasting wild, tame environments of Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice influence and change the characters. So overall, we can kind of see Pride and Prejudice as the tame and Wuthering Heights as more of the wild. But even within Pride and Prejudice, there's different settings. So some of the wild romantic environments such as Brighton or Ramsgate that Lydia goes off to, that's like a seaside town. It's a lot more wild and alive than where she was brought up. We also see that Darcy's perception of Elizabeth and Elizabeth's perception of Darcy very much change when they're at Pemberley. So Elizabeth, suddenly thinks, oh wow, like Darcy's pretty great. This is a nice house. I could potentially like him. And so does Darcy. He sees Elizabeth with her more upper class family members, and she's away from that wild countryside, and he starts to kind of see her in a different light again. Oh gosh. And then if we go back to Wuthering Heights, Catherine has that transformation between the two environments, and she and that's also reversed for Isabella. So Isabella is more, refined when she lives at Thrushcross Grange, and then she goes to the Heights and she kind of, has to break free. She has to be wild to kind of escape, domestic violence and the brutal, wild Heathcliff. And yeah, I guess, again, this really alludes to how Bronte celebrates the romantic wildness of characters, women and men, and Austen doesn't. She condemns it. So here are my references. I won't talk about all of them, but one of my favorites is this one here by Gough, Between Natural Theology and Natural Selection, Breeding the Human Animal. Very interesting paper about how, Bronte was quite aware of the ideas of Darwinism and breeding, and how generations can be affected by their parents and sins of the father. So that's very kind of relevant to this idea of how nature and how wildness interact with the characters. So yeah.
That was great. That was fantastic. I'm very much looking forward to reading that essay. I don't really have many suggestions because we've corresponded over this and it's really great to see you kind of develop a very complex argument. regarding your two thesis statements, you might kind of, as you come to write up your essay, find that one does the work better than the other. But a general piece of advice to everyone, always come back to your thesis statement after you've kind of done the body of your essay, because you'll often find that you make the discoveries, you make the really interesting points in trying to just argue the beginning thesis statement you've had. But that looks like a really good essay, Camille. And yeah, I'll be really interested in reading that. I did kind of think that maybe Wickham he knows how to perform the gentleman. And I think that's interesting because he is definitely cast as being wild. Reynolds describes him as turning out wild. And as I mentioned in a few of the emails, he possesses this vicious nature. He's wild, but he's vicious, which is a nasty type of wildness, which you see in Wuthering Heights, but it's never really kind of castigated like that. But I don't know, I think there's Wickham knows how to perform the gentleman, but Darcy kind of, I don't know, I think there's an essentialist argument in that novel where there is actually an authentic gentleman being kind of represented. But I'm rambling on. No, that was wonderful. I look forward to reading it, and I'll send you some feedback when you upload it to the Collaborate. Thank you. I've got you down to go next, Chelsea.
Yeah.
Maybe, sorry, Chelsea, maybe I should ask the class, would anyone like to ask questions to the person presenting after they've given their talk? Because I think that could be a good thing to do as well, because if anyone has any questions, please just put your hand up and say, I've got a question for Camille. Because a lot of people are really getting into the chat, maybe ask the question in the chat. But yeah, if you want to sing out and say, hey, I want to just say, hey, maybe you should check this out or check that out, please do. But Chelsea, would you like to go?
All right. I'm trying to work out the screen share. I'm not really great at it.
Yeah, if anyone can kind of suggest to Chelsea where you find it. Is it just for you guys? Is it just at the bottom of the screen and it's green and it says share screen? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's just.
Take your time, Chelsea.
Sorry.
No, take your time. No need to apologize.
All right. Can you guys see that?
Yep. Yep, we can see it now.
Perfect. So I decided to. Sorry, go.
I was just going to say they're yuccas. You've got yuccas there. The plant. Anyway, go.
I decided to focus on Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Just a quick trigger warning for everyone. It does include sexual assault. So if you do feel a bit uncomfortable hearing it, I won't be mad if you do not listen to my presentation. To start, my slides include an argument and scooping statement, including my thesis as well, and my 3 arguments. Oops, sorry, I skipped a slide. Is that lagging for you guys as well?
I don't know. I'm looking at your one.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Thank you. So I decided to look at the argument statement provided that was Tess of the D'Urbervilles explores social problems associated with class and gender oppression, how romance and realism employed by Hardy to represent them. You might like to consider to what extent his novel works as an examination of the primacy of gender over class in individual trauma. Furthermore, if it loads, sorry guys, I decided to kind of make my own argument statements after talking with Christopher. I have 2 options so far. My first one is that Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles depicts how the idea of purity ultimately prohibits females from experiencing true romance. And my second one is Tess of the D'Urbervilles demonstrates how sexism disables a successful life of females, with the 1800s realism views prohibiting romance. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous.
Just relax. It's I know that doesn't help, but I don't know how to tell people to relax, but this can't be any more relaxing. As I saw someone with a nightgown on before, perfectly fine. So take it easy, Chelsea.
Thank you. So for my scooping and thesis statement, I said that in my essay, the main focus will be on exploring the sexism within the text, using specifically the scenes between Alec and Tess and Angel and Tess to do so. I aim to discuss how the realism caused by society's expectations ultimately disables any romance to blossom. Furthermore, I will focus on the patriarchy and what influences these oppressions, such as church, purity, gender roles, etc. Throughout my essay, I will argue how Tess ultimately Tess was ultimately tied to a negative fate from the beginning. And overall, I aim to showcase how Hardy demonstrates the struggles females face due to ideas such as the purity, social expectations, and sexism. I aim to highlight the romance and realism in the text, looking at the romance between Angel and Tess is blossoming, and how Angel struggles being he wants to be a romantic, but Tess is being quite a realist and going through the challenges of saying, I want to be with Angel, however, I feel like I'm not worthy because of the situation that she was in. Looking at the realism side, like I was saying, Tess ultimately believing she is not worthy of life as she understands that her lack of purity disables her from being an acceptable woman. I really wanted to highlight this quote. It's probably one of the main quotes in the book that I was like, oh my God, what is this like? It really shocked me. Why didn't you tell me that there was danger in menfolk? Why didn't you warn me? It really symbolizes the sexism in the text and how it was placed that it's a female's fault. Like, it's your fault that this happened to you. You should know better, instead of going, oh, hang on, like a male shouldn't be doing that to you.
Yeah, that's Tess arguing with her mother, Joan d'Urberville, after she gets back from Trantridge. And I believe she also mentions, some women have novels to read where they get information about people like Alec d'Urberville.
Yeah, which I found very, very interesting. I was like, oh my God, I never expected to read about that. So looking at my first argument, I aim to argue how Hardy is able to portray how females are unable to live their lives to the fullest due to society's expectations. Looking at the idea of purity, Tess ultimately being shunned and being unable to feel worthy of life due to the issues of her purity, ultimately not believing she's worthy of romance. I like to look at Tess not being picked to dance with Angel at the May Day dance, and I don't know, I'm trying to work out the foreshadowing and maybe how it's symbolic to her not being worthy of his love in him in the future. Because the May Day dance was a sign of purity with them wearing white. I'm still trying to figure out what the connection is there, but I feel like there might be something there. And in the kind of dark pink at the bottom, I've got one of the quotes that I believe is very important. I'll give you guys a few seconds to read that. Just give me a thumbs up once you guys have read it. Perfect. So for argument 2, it is demonstrated how in society males are enabled to disrespect females due to their different expectations. I wanted to focus on Alec's behaviour towards Tess, his lack of respect for Tess' body, disobeying her saying no, and just he's feeling like, oh, I can do this. Even when he's driving her and he's like, I want to kiss, he gets quite mad at the start when she says no. I again have the quote about why didn't you tell me there was danger in menfolk, because I believe that is showcasing how men are able to treat females like this and it's seen as okay compared to women should know better and should be able to protect themselves and be like, oh, I need to do this to prevent this from happening. Hardy's use of Tess blaming herself symbolises the allowed disrespect by males to females in the 1800s due to social expectations, ultimately causing Tess to believe she isn't worthy of romance, like I've stated numerous times. For argument 3, Angel's reaction to finding out Tess is not pure showcases how a romantic fate is unachievable. Sorry, I forgot to read the main argument. I'm getting too ahead of myself. Hardy is ultimately able to showcase how an undesired fate is unavoidable when women do not fit expectations. In the book, it was really like about fate and about like believing and stuff. Especially it is shown in Mrs. Durbifield's book when she's really passionate about that she has high belief in fate for the family. At the start, Tess is the same, as she had hoped to be a teacher at the school, but the fate seemed to decide otherwise. But then as the book continues, it does take a turn. But it's as well, Tess believes that she does not deserve Angel as part of her fate due to her past. So it does believe that like fate is an important part of the text. And I would like to argue how it doesn't really help Tess, because she believes that because of the social expectations, she isn't worthy of a positive fate. Looking at my academic sources, I gave a quick either a quote from the source I found very interesting that I'd like to include, or just like a brief summary. So for my first one that was about pure women, it discusses Hardy's betrayal of purity and it's important in the text. The next one underneath it, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. It depicts the loss of faith and how an undesired fate is unavoidable for Tess. And then we've just got the quote, in this juxtaposition, Angel's confessions stands as a mirror image of Tess's. Throughout, they are apparently similar. Angel has a different significance and works in a different way. I found that very important because during the text, Angel confesses something quite significant as well, as but he feels like he should be he's more forgiven. He doesn't think he should be as forgiven much, but compared to what Tess does, he sees as what she's done as way worse, when I don't really agree.
That's like the big shock in the novel, is the double standard and the way Angel's kind of so shocked that someone who has been assaulted it's kind of one of those most frustrating moments in the novel.
Yeah, as being in the 21st century now and seeing reading about all this, I'm just like, what the heck is going on? I can't picture it in today's society. And lastly, the bottom right corner, the author tries to emphasize the purity of the heroine, and in consequence, he fails to describe her as a flesh and blood female and ends with her execution, which I found that very, very interesting. I really enjoyed this article if you guys did want to read it. These are my references.
That's great, Chelsea. That was really good.
Thank you. Do you guys have any questions?
I have a suggestion which someone can jump in. When you talked about Alec and his entitlement, you might want to think about what Alec first says to Tess. Does anyone know how Alec first addresses Tess? How he kind of...
Off memory, it's quite degrading, because he says it's a bit... I can't remember the exact quote, but he calls her a nickname or something as well.
It runs throughout most of the first half of the novel. My beauty, which is very possessive and very objectifying. Beauty belongs to Alec pretty much from the outset, and it doesn't really change. He becomes sleazier towards the end. I did also have a suggestion about fate, and I wanted to suggest one of the elements that you may have kind of not noticed is there's this weird romantic curse that's embedded in the novel, the curse of the D'Urberville coach. And you mentioned that coach ride with Alec, where he's trying to get a kiss off her, and Tess says, "I thought you would, be nice to me because we're kinsmen." And he says, "Kinsmen be hanged." And of course, that's what happens to Tess in the end of the novel. And there's this legendary curse of the d'Urberville coach, in which once upon a time, Tess d'Urberville's ancestors they have this dark streak in their blood, and they often kind of thrash out and kill people. So there's a weird curse there, but interesting. I'll ask you more about it in the feedback, because I think we could run out of time, but what you mean by this fate. Amber's got chit. He does use the word chit as well, I think. I think he does, yeah. My chit as well. My beauty, my chit. He's got a whole lot of kind of reifying or objectifying kind of nouns that he uses, which kind of, they tell you a lot about his sense of entitlement. That was great, Chelsea. Any questions? No, good. I think we're all worried about time, which I kind of am as well, because I don't know. But now, did I have someone down to go next? I think I did. I wrote their names down.
Yeah, it was me.
It was Hayley.
Yeah.
Would you like to go next?
Cool. I'll just share my screen 1 second.
There's a bit of a rhyme. We're going Hayley, then Kaylee. That's pretty lame, Chris.
I do not want to go after any of these people.
Do you want to go further down? It's up to you, Kaylee. That work.
Don't worry, mine's not a fancy PowerPoint. It's just one of the basic ones. So I wouldn't
I
worry.
already seen it and it already looks so much better than mine.
Okay, so for the original essay question I was doing, it is, however much literacy is taken for granted today, for most people living in the early to mid 19th century, being able to read and write was a privilege. Discuss the ways in which 2 of the novels we have read in this unit use romance and realism to promote greater literacy. So the argument statement or thesis statement is that Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights both suggest that those of higher social rank can access the resources, enabling them to read and write, therefore making the ladies of society acceptable to become a wife. So for my scoping statement, I said this essay will focus on the dominant male characters in both of the novels and of their expectations of a highly educated wife. I chose to predominantly focus on males because I believe that their expectations of literacy in the opposite gender are of much higher expectation than those of the women. In the first section, I'll focus on Mr. Darcy. So it'll be his expectation of a wife, which is predominantly education and ability focused. However, he does not expect any form of passion, therefore making him a realist, mostly in the beginning of the novel. Mr. Darcy's high standards, therefore, encourage the ladies of society to pursue a higher level of literacy. This therefore encouraged the development of literacy and the progression in women specifically in the future years to come. As you can now see in the 21st century, male and women education is the same. And then in the second part, I'll be discussing Mr. Heathcliff. He ventures in the opposite direction, whereby he's not affected by one's education in the beginning, just because he wasn't born into a wealthy family. However, when he becomes overcome by wealth, as he's adopted, he becomes aware of the need to possess a highly educated wife, such as he later marries Isabella rather than Catherine. This essay looks at characters such as Edgar Linton and Mr. Bingley as well in both novels, whose views on a wife stem still from a well-educated lady, however, more so from a romantic perspective, as seen through Jane specifically. In Pride and Prejudice. This essay will not venture into the lower classes' access to education, nor the privileges males and females differ in these times. It solely focuses on the privileged upper class. And this essay will demonstrate how literacy became of such importance as society expanded. It uses key male characters to demonstrate how society became reliant and determined to develop a higher literacy level, most commonly stemming from the determination to wed in the future. And then my evidence and sub-arguments. So for my first argument, within Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy chooses not to engage in such ideals of marriage unless accompanied by those of higher education. Miss Elizabeth Bennet, who happens to come from a middle-class family, it's kind of where I would gauge her, middle to upper, can afford education, making her of a worthy companion. It's never quite clear. I'm not sure if she has a tutor or how she's educated, but we do know she is of reading and writing. Mr. Darcy expresses, whilst Jane is sick in the Bingley home, of his expectations of an accomplished woman, discussed in chapter 7/8. The quote is, "A woman must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, all of the modern languages to deserve the word." I just thought this was a really interesting quote of a man being specific of all the expectations he thinks is needed in a woman. My second argument will focus on Wuthering Heights, specifically Mr. Heathcliff. It demonstrates through characters such as him that their expectations of a wife, after becoming accustomed to the lifestyle of a wealthy lifestyle, develop to such high standards. This is found specifically in Mr. Heathcliff's return to the Wuthering Heights as a gentleman and of wealth. And he does come back, and Catherine is married, and he ends with Isabella, who, like himself, is determined as of a higher education. And then my third argument focuses on a character from each of the novels. So Mr. Edgar Linton from Wuthering Heights and Mr. Bingley from Pride and Prejudice. They both share the desperation to marry an accomplished woman, however, seek a romantic connection rather than a realistic and sensible one. As seen with Edgar Linton, his decision to be with Catherine, he fought for it and it was a lot harder, therefore caused him issues in the future with Mr. Heathcliff. And similar to Mr. Bingley, his relationship with Jane, it didn't come of ease, especially in the development of Elizabeth and also Mr. Darcy. But yeah, they both expect still a highly educated woman. And then there's my bibliography. I did choose to do 2 of the readings that were already on VU Collaborate space. And then a few I found on VU Collaborate that talk of specifically relationships and feminism. And I thought that feminism does play a significant role in this, even though I don't specifically go into gender roles, but I think it's very specific in both books. So yeah.
Oh, that was excellent, Hayley. And I'm so glad I hope others are doing the question on literacy, but that's something that's always interested me, is the history of literacy in this period, because everyone just assumes everyone can read and write, but you're talking about a good percentage of the population who couldn't. It's going to be a very interesting read, your essay. I do find Isabella interesting because her knowledge of literature kind of leads her to misinterpret Darcy's representation, because she kind of reads him as a hero of romance, which he kind of turns out not to be.
Exactly, yeah.
Another really interesting thing, of course, is Mr. Bingley and that argument he has with Mr. Darcy about the way they write, because Charles Bingley, he's not the best with a pen, is he?
No.
No, but nonetheless, the men seem to kind of seem to expect
the double standards.
They may persevere on today, I think. But I do think one thing I might suggest before we, if anyone else has any questions, I do think women are more educated than men today. So it's not even that there's maybe a pay gap, which is an asymmetricality, but women tend to have greater education, which is a good thing, I guess. Of course it is.
Yeah, especially from how it used to be and the expectations back then. So it's good, if anything.
Yeah, totally, because you have like Wickham and Darcy going on to higher education, but none of the kind of talented females. I imagine Mary Bennet, she would have excelled in higher education. She would have become an academic because she's good at reciting quotations and things. Any questions for Hayley?
Hayley, I'm doing the same one, and I just wanted to let you know that I have taken your bibliography and will be taking from it.
That's okay.
So I just wanted to let you know. Thank you so much.
That's fine. No. No worries.
Is Lance stealing your sources?
I'll allow it. It's fine.
Okay. Thanks, Haley.
No worries. Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
I think it was me, unfortunately.
Go, Kaylee.
This is so overwhelming. Like mine's going to be the first bad one, so just prepare.
What are you talking about? I've given like 9 sessions of bad stuff, so you guys are like all excelling now. That's what I always hate about these PowerPoints. Yes, good. That's what one thing Australians are good at, depreciating themselves. So
No, but seriously, this is actually really bad. So don't mind me. So here, can you see that? Can you see my screen? I don't know.
Yep.
Amazing. Okay. So I chose question number 4, which is Wuthering Heights predominantly displays romantic narrative elements, including elements of the Gothic genre. Sorry, I can't even talk. Discuss whether this is an accurate description of this novel. So I just did a really short one because I just thought I would go more into depth when I do the essay itself. So mine is very short and sweet. So my argument statement is, I believe that within Wuthering Heights, dark plots and characters assist the novel to be considered a Gothic novel, and half my sentence is gone. Thus, the genre of the novel is more than just romance. Half of my sentence has actually disappeared, so I need to edit that actually, but
that's okay. That's okay.
yeah. Okay, so I'll be discussing an introduction of what the Gothic genre entails and the meaning of it, just so the reader can get an understanding of how different elements within the novel can relate to the Gothic genre. Events and pivotal scenes in which display aspects of the Gothic genre. Characters in which have Gothic qualities, so like a miniature kind of character analysis. How the setting in which the story takes place contributes to the Gothic theme, and how in which other aspects, such as weather and extreme emotion, also contribute to the Gothic feel of the story. So these are some of my sub-arguments I'll be incorporating in my essay. So I'll be discussing supernatural elements within the book. So they are often used in Gothic novels. The use of ghosts and ghostly encounters within the novel are prime examples of supernatural elements. And I've got in chapter 3 there to have another look at and get some information from chapter 3. I've got Heathcliff's characteristic provide Gothic elements through his character. So I'll be exploring his character. The location of the novel is described as having a creepy type of feel about it, as well as this weather. The weather of this location is often extreme / dark and stormy. So in the book, it's the parts that I've researched more into, a lot of them are quite dark and stormy type weather, which also is contributes to the Gothic kind of feel of the novel. And the decline of Catherine's mental health status as well, I'll be having a look into. These were some of the books that I read, and then my reference list is on the next slide. So I did do that. I just put them on 2 different slides. So 2 of them are from the Collaborate, and 2 of them are from the library that I've kind of researched into. And that's just my reference list. And that's all.
Thanks, Kaylee. I'll have lots to give you feedback on. I hope it wasn't too burdensome. One general thing that I will mention, and it's kind of something that kind of don't kind of, I know people say this and they probably just believe it. I noticed in your thesis statement, Kaylee, you said, I believe. Belief, if you look it up in the dictionary, kind of means a commitment to a certain doctrine based on no factual or evidentiary knowledge. Like belief is often constituted as a matter of faith, which kind of I'm perfectly fine with. But in a way, this is just general feedback to everyone because it does happen often. People will have their thesis statement and it'll entail belief. You want to argue, you want to think, you want to have an opinion because those ways of thinking are founded upon knowledge and evidence. Because I don't think, Kaylee, you actually mean believe. You probably mean I think, because you're arguing and you want to support your argument with kind of lots of knowledge and evidence from the text. But just generally, some kind of examiners and people kind of eyebrows begin to raise when they see the word belief, because belief is often founded upon nothing. So that's just general kind of warning for everyone. Avoid using the word belief, even though you might not mean belief in that way. Yeah, sorry, I hope that didn't sound very harsh, but I'm very anti-belief arguments. No, I haven't hurt anyone's feelings. Sorry if I have, Kaylee. How are you feeling about the essay? You feeling all right?
Not really.
Well, we'll reach out. I'll give you lots of feedback and give you some areas to focus on.
Do you know what? At least I'm honest. If you can take anything from that, is that I'm very honest.
Yeah, you're like Mr. Darcy, which is good.
I'm not confident and I'm not excited. But I'll do it. It'll be okay.
Yeah, I kind of get confident and get excited. It's hard to enthuse one, but did you find the novel difficult? Is that the trouble?
I've been listening to the audiobook and I'm reading. So like when I'm driving, I'm listening to the audiobook, and when I'm at home, I read the actual, I bought the book because I can't deal with looking at my laptop for hours. Yeah. So I bought the book, and I was talking because I work at a school, and so I was asking the librarian about it, and she was like, "Oh, we've got like a dumbed down version of it if you want it." And I was kind of like, "Thanks." I don't know if that's the problem.
That is a bit horrible. Like, did she use those words, dumbed down?
Yeah. And I was like, that would be really helpful, but like also kind of mean.
Yeah. I'll give you lots of feedback, so hopefully that will be reassuring. Thank you for going early as well.
Thank you for allowing me to, and thank you for dealing with that awful presentation. I hope you somewhat enjoyed it.
No, it wasn't totally bad. There were some areas like missing sentences and things, but your honesty is great, and you've also kind of lowered the bar for others, because we did have, to be honest, sorry, I don't want to sound critical. We did have some really stellar presentations. So it was a hard act to follow going then. So who would like to go next?
Excuse me. I would like to lower the bar further, please.
Okay.
Is that possible? I don't.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even have time to make a PowerPoint, so
I made a PowerPoint while I was listening, like this afternoon. So that's probably why half my sentences are gone. But I'm gonna upload the Word doc, I reckon.
All right. Would you like to go, Lance?
Yes, please.
Go for it. What question are you doing? Literacy question.
I'm doing the literacy question. Yeah. While I set it up, I just want to let people know that this is more for my sake rather than getting marks, because it's mostly just so I can read out my insane ramblings and see if people look at me weird or if they sort of go, oh, okay, while I set this up. But okay, there we go. Hang on. I guess I'll just do this as well. Hi. Okay. So yeah, this is sort of my process of like going about things, and I just sort of write what I'm thinking and move from there. So I've chosen this question, so the literacy one, as I mentioned before, but it's a bit different to what was said before. So I've got two statements because I was sort of thinking about like the ways that I could approach this, and the first one was I'll just read it out. Books and reading are used by Jane Austen to characterize the people in her stories. often type of books and characters, and the character's inclinations to read are indicators of a character's morals and class. Similarly, Bronte also uses readings to characterize the people in Wuthering Heights, but instead in a way that characters provide or withhold access to the necessary education. So as you can see with that first statement, I thought I would go over Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice. And for this second, oh wait, oh that's weird. Okay, I'm not sure why, but the rest of the second statement, it just isn't there. I did do it on my other computer and I sent it over, so I might have just done something wrong. So I'll just read what I do have, which is the cycle of revenge perpetrated by the characters in Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights uses the perception of education and withholding of to explore love in the 19th century. Essentially, I thought like maybe I should just focus on Wuthering Heights because it's a bit of it's spoilers, but with my potential sub arguments, I realized I had way more to say about Wuthering Heights than I did Pride and Prejudice. So I guess it could go either way, but so I wrote 2 scoping statements depending on which one I decided to go with. So if I use number 1, I would write about first of all, the Pride and Prejudice section of the essay would focus on 2 key points of the book. First would be the portrayal of Elizabeth, who's well-read and clever, and how these traits of hers are desirable to Mr. Darcy and by extension the reader. But the main bulk of the essay would be about Wuthering Heights, specifically the ways in which education is given and withheld from its characters. There's of course the mistreatment of Heathcliff and the parallels that he would later share with Hareton, because I forget. There's so many H's. I can't remember. I believe it's Hindley. Hindley would stop Heathcliff from getting the education that he needed, and then by extension, Heathcliff would stop Hareton from getting his education. And then how that would, and then the difference between them being how Heathcliff would go on to perpetuate the cycle of violence, whereas Hareton would charm Cathy with his kindness, and by receiving the education, he would be elevated to find happiness with her. So also in this way, Cathy would go on to do better than her mother, as in educating Hareton, she could look past the superficial nature of Hareton's illiteracy and love him despite their differences. So thesis 2 is pretty much similar, except it wouldn't have the Pride and Prejudice section, and I could go into greater detail about Wuthering Heights, because I could also talk about how I could talk about how despite all the love Catherine had for Heathcliff, she couldn't entertain the idea of truly being with him thanks to Hindley's revenge, of making sure that Heathcliff wouldn't have the education and like class standing that he would have been able to. So the sub arguments that I had were mostly about so in Pride and Prejudice, in chapter 8, I think, or chapter 7. I wrote chapter 8, but I'm starting to think it was in chapter 7. I can't remember exactly. But they did talk about the books they were reading, and there was that conversation about the bookshelves that people had in their houses and their opinions based off of how full they were. I would look into that further, but and then there's Elizabeth and her sisters are all smart and learned. And then this whole paragraph here is about the the sort of the giving and the taking of people's ability to be literate, and how greatly it affected their lives ultimately. And then this one is about how most of Heathcliff's problems come from being unable to have that in his life. And then, so the romance is used Oh, sorry. Romance is used when portraying Hareton, who is a kind, gentle soul that works hard and through his lessons with Kathy finds happiness. The elevation of Hareton from his uneducated state leads to the remaining characters finally finding happiness. I noted that this is very noticeable as Heathcliff ultimately gives up on his vengeance when he sees himself and his relationship with Catherine when looking at Kathy and Hareton, allowing him to pass quietly. Ultimately, the story comes full circle, and Heathcliff allows the young man like he once was to find happiness despite his circumstances, which would be the lack of education. And then, yeah, unlike her mother, Kathy is able to look past her status and education and appreciate Hareton for who he is, fulfilling the romance that Heathcliff wanted with her mother. And then here's my bibliography, which is really bad because I couldn't find anything that was like as specific as what I was looking for. I wanted way more, obviously, but this is what I gotten so far.
That's a good start.
Yeah,
it's
a bit scatterbrained because I kind of, so it's ordered in this way, but I actually sort of did it like this. I did my arguments first, and then I was like, okay, I'll make my thesis statement based off these arguments. I'll make my thesis statement. Yeah. So it's a bit of a mess, but yeah.
No, that it's not so much of a mess. I don't think it's too much of a mess. And it's great that you've got 2 thesis statements and 2 possible avenues to go down. It sounds like the second avenue may be the one to pursue first. And if you run out of space, you can expand to include Pride and Prejudice you could expand to include the first thesis statement. So yeah, it looks like it's shaping up to be a good essay. I kind of will probably send you some links to some sources that may be helpful on being more specific when it comes to literacy. But it looks quite good. It looks like you're going to be looking at realism when it comes to the way education is deprived, and then you'll be looking at romance in terms of how kind of literacy becomes central to driving the romantic denouement or ending. One thing I had as a suggestion is look at the way Mrs. Bingley is represented in terms of reading culture, because she sits there and she can't read a book because she's so obsessed with Mr. Darcy that she kind of spoils everyone else's reading by wanting to talk all the time. That could be something to look at. Any questions for Lance?
Stop sharing. I didn't realize I was still sharing. I was yeah.
Yeah, all of you guys that have done your presentations, be sure to upload them to Collaborate so I can like have something to give you feedback on after you've kind of presented today, because there's 2 components. But thanks, Lance.
Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
Would I please?
Yeah, sorry. Who was that? Was that?
Melinda.
Melinda, sorry. I think you might have mentioned it in the chat, and I'm not checking the chat too.
No, that's okay.
And I think Sarisha's asked to go after Melinda. Has anyone else jumped in the chat saying I'd like to go?
Can I go after Sarisha? Sorry.
So we've
Dana and Ryan have also put our names in there as well if we go into the chat.
Okay. So just before Melinda goes, we've got Melinda. Who have we got? Can I go after Melinda, Sarisha? Melissa, and then Dana, and I'll have a look at it in a moment. But yeah, would you like to go, Melinda? Sorry if I've missed people and they should be going earlier. Someone sing out. But go, Melinda. Would you like to share screen or?
Yeah, cool. All right. So I'll share my screen. It's not letting me share my screen. It's weird.
What's it saying? Is it saying
it's like, wait, I think it's telling me to go system preferences. Okay, wait, I'll try this now.
There we
Okay,
go.
can we see that?
Yep.
All right, beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so the question I'm focusing on is what relationship do these styles of representation share with the character personification? To what extent does the representation of environment speak to realism and romance? So I think there's definitely room to add things into this plan, but this is just like my first brainstorm trying to organize all of my thoughts. My contention argument is the environment in which Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights is set in foreshadows the events that occur, sets the scene and tone, and reflects the intentions of characters. So my first paragraph, my topic sentence, this might change, depending on the feedback I get or if I have any more ideas. But in Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth treats nature as an escapism and a place of comfort where she can make sense of her world. Additionally, Pemberley Estate is used to further represent Mr. Darcy's character. And sub-arguments I would probably include is the comparison between Elizabeth's untamed, outspoken nature compared to like how nature is wild and untamed, and how she, and like to support this, it's when she like goes on for her solitude walks, and that's her time to herself to reflect. And also how Mr. Darcy is represented through his surroundings, and like through the Pemberley Estate, which I feel like will give opportunity to talk about class representation between him and Elizabeth. And then also wanted to try and include animal symbolism, with Mr. Darcy enjoying like fox hunting, which can be likened to Mr. Wickham's character, who we've kind of explored, can be quite the fox in the story. And so those are just some quotes that I've tried to collect to support that, and just a reading I found, which I hope to like pinpoint some things to help support what I'm trying to say. My second paragraph would be focusing on Wuthering Heights. So my topic sentence would be the Wuthering Heights. The reader's first impressions of Heathcliff and Edgar Linton is set from the scenery descriptions that strongly links to these characters' personalities. And I feel like, again, this can describe like the different classes between them, because Wuthering Heights is so different to Thrushcross Grange. And it will hopefully give me room to talk about the different types of masculinity, because I know Edgar Linton is kind of described differently to like where Heathcliff is more not masculine, he's more like Edgar is seen as weak, like he needs his servants to have everything done for him, all that, and they're just different. So it'd be good to explore different types of masculinity. And again, I'll try and find animal representations and how this supports characters' personalities. And so here's just some descriptions of the Wuthering Heights Manor and Thrushcross Grange. And my third paragraph, I would hopefully talk about the difference between Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice, the natural descriptions, and how this creates two very different texts while still existing within the romantic realm. So both like love stories, but Wuthering Heights is a lot more tragic. But I would probably talk about how they meet in the end, like in the moors after death. Like that's the only way that they can be together once they've died. Whereas Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth, they succeed in overcoming all the barriers, which kind of follows the the tropes of romanticism a bit more. And I would hopefully talk about like the scenes in which these happen in, talk about like how the moor represents the death, and that's when they do meet, once they are like, they're trying to find like some symbolism in that. And also in the confrontation scene between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. And just some of my evidence there. And I've put like my evidence and references throughout my piece to relate to like each paragraph. But that's what I've got so far.
Great, thanks, Belinda. How are you feeling about it?
Very overwhelmed. I don't know. I haven't had to do this in such a long time. Just first time reading a classical text. So I don't know. Yeah, I'll just see how I go.
Yeah, start early so you can kind of, if you have any obstacles, you can overcome them. You guys have got kind of still a fair while. It's till Sunday midnight to get it done. So yeah, you've still got a lot of time to kind of reread the text, kind of identify areas that help support your arguments. That's looking like it's shaping up. I kind of noticed that you had some page numbers there, but probably others you'll be keying in kind of soon. But yeah, upload that to Collaborate and I should be able to fill you in with some more feedback. And hopefully that will be helpful. Thanks, Melinda.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Sarisha, would you like to go next?
Yes, please. I'll just try to share my screen.
Oh, would you mind, Sarisha? Sorry, I just see I see there's like a democracy that's been established in the chat, and I think everyone was typing at the same time. Did you want to go, Melissa? Would you like to go? It's just I've noticed that you jumped in before Sarisha.
That's okay. She can go. That's fine.
All right, go, Sarisha, then.
Sorry, I didn't know that.
No, sorry. It's just some people weren't here at the beginning, and I thought let's just kind of go democratically rather than alphabetically. Go, Sarisha.
Sorry, just letting you know, mine is not PowerPoint presentation. It's just the Word document.
That's
Hope
okay.
you guys don't mind. Okay, does everyone can see my screen?
Yep.
Sweet. Okay, so I'm not sure how to get rid of that. Maybe I'll just try her video. No, that doesn't work.
So you're looking at Wuthering Heights as a Gothic novel.
Yes. Okay, that's my question. Hi, everyone. Hope you're able to hear me. So if not, please let me know. So my question is like Wuthering Heights predominantly displays romantic narrative elements, including elements of Gothic genre. So discuss that, whether that is true or not. So to support that, we have to read this whole novel. I read that. I enjoyed it thoroughly. So that's my thesis statement. I'm going to discuss about what is Gothic and like how it is associated with Wuthering Heights and how we can say it's a Gothic novel and like why Bronte chose that Gothic to represent Wuthering Heights. So this novel has like many romantic narratives, but it often associated with antipathy, like how Catherine is helping Hindley, but still it has like little bit of negative aspect towards that and all those. And according to my opinion, Gothic is a perfect genre she chose to represent Wuthering Heights because of that 19th century. All this reality like domestic violence, exploitation, and inequality was not real. It's not explained in any of Victorian novels, so but she is the first one who tried to explain that. So that's why I think she chose Gothic. That's just my opinion. And that's my scoping statement. So like how I mentioned, like initially I'm going to discuss about what is Gothic and how it's like introduced. So the first Gothic novel was Castle of Otranto. It published in 1764. Oh, sorry. And it has like associated, the Gothic fiction is associated with moors, graveyards, and wild weather. So how it associated in the Wuthering Heights as well. And the sudden appearances of supernatural things like such as Kathy as a ghost in Wuthering Heights and Dracula novel. So this is like, when I read all those, I feel like, wow, something is really happening in the novel. So that feels like excitement, astonishment for the reader. And next I'm going to discuss about why Emily Bronte chose that. So Emily Bronte's childhood is one of the reasons for Wuthering Heights because she lost her mother when she was 3 years old and she grew up with like no motherly care. So all these are affected and like that's how the Wuthering Heights shape as like Hindley lost his mother, and like as well as Catherine, and as well as the Catherine Jr. So everyone is associated. They doesn't have any motherly bond. Who can show them love and affection? So I think that's the reality behind the cruelty, like why the children behave that way. And then I'm going to discuss about like the interesting fact about Gothic novel and how connection between the past and present. So it's like how the Heathcliff's behavior was completely changed. Now, this is first like initially in chapter 3 when Lockwood experienced the ghost Catherine in his dream, and when he asked like, can I let me in? So that's the first appearances. And he is explaining that to Heathcliff. So he can associate with the past of Catherine died in 20 years back. So that juxtaposition, it gives the one of the reasons, I think one of the main elements in Gothic. And the landscapes, so how I explained about like moors and graveyards, they all associated there. And then I'm going to discuss about like how she explained Wuthering Heights as a wild and those narrow windows and deeply walls and grotesque carvings. These are explained like this is not a healthy environment, which is not welcomed anyone, whereas Thrushcross Grange is completely like positive, happy place where everyone is welcomed. So I'm going to discuss more about it. And then my sub-arguments were like, I'll discuss supernatural connections in chapter 3, how I said about Kathy, and how in chapter 11, when like Catherine, the first Catherine, she just lost herself and she's so sick and she just tear up all the pillows, and then she find out all the different pieces of like feathers, and then she explains she completely lost herself and she went into the future, and she says, I will be living on this moors for 20 years, even though if every one of you died. I think that's a sort of Gothic genre. I'm going to discuss about it. And then I'll discuss about the difference between Thrushcross Grange and Wuthering Heights. So that I'm going to read about chapter 6. And then so many animals were represented here in this novel throughout. So I'm going to discuss like, so the dogs were explained as wild, and Heathcliff was explained as vampire in some of the, and Hindley was represented as, I think, as sweet beast, I think that's the word, because he is large, and but comparing with that, his nature is so sweet. He's always helpful to everyone. So that's what I'm going to discuss more about it. And then I'm going to discuss about like why Bronte chose that with the help of Social Imagination article, and that's my references. I'm sorry if I mispronounce any. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarisha. Yeah, how are you feeling? Are you feeling like you're set up to write a good essay? It looks like you've got a lot of research done already.
I'm pretty confident. Thank you so much for your help. Your email really helped me. I was so confused, like, do I have to go with romantic narrative or Gothic narrative? To me personally, it's a Gothic narrative. Everywhere when I read every chapter, I can associate with it. But please let me know if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you don't need to. I've noticed that with a lot of you guys are all mentioning animals and things. Like if you don't kind of, if you don't have the room to talk about beasties, that's fine as well. But I do think a lot of these essays, these plans will need to be condensed down because you want to talk about a lot, which is good to start with. But yeah, don't be afraid to put certain sections on the chopping block when it comes to meeting the word count. But it's looking good, Sarisha. So thank you. I'm a bit hesitant for time now, but Melissa, would you like to go now?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'll just quickly share my screen. Bear with me. It wants me to open system preferences.
Yeah, I don't know why it's asking that. Did it ask others to do that?
I'm not too sure. I think it should work now. I think it's because it's a Mac thing, possibly.
Ah, yes.
Okay.
I'm seeing it.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Lovely. So I'm pretty much comparing Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights. Great start. So the question I picked was, dance appears in all three of the novels. We have read this unit. In Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy infamously refers to Lizzie infamously refuses to ask Lizzie to dance. In Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff is excluded from the Christmas dance, and Tess opens with a dance. Focusing on dance in 2 or 3 of the novels, consider the importance dance holds with respect to romance, realism, class, and gender. So my argument statement was, through this paper, I will explore the ideology of dance and how it is explored through Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights. I intend on exploring how this is veneered through parallels between class, gender, and romance. Additionally, how the Regency period compares to the Victorian era and how this influences Bronte and Austen's novels and their themes of class and gender. My limiting statement, so these little 3 tables here are my 3 separate paragraphs. So the microcosm of marriage and courtship will be my first theme. So I'll be focusing on the Regency period and how social behaviour was an expression of the characters. Therefore, Austen's characters are more likely to express their true selves through mannerisms and personality. Through my second paragraph, I'll be focusing on rejection, pride, and gender. In this paragraph, I'll also be focusing on Pride and Prejudice and the 3 points of rejection between Darcy and Elizabeth. And how through the Regency era, a person's individual worth was revealed through performance and beauty on the dance floor. And I will not be including any other character relationships through this. I'm purely focusing on Darcy and Elizabeth's relationship. Through my third paragraph, I'm focusing on class and social hierarchy, where I am trying to delve deeper through Wuthering Heights. I'm focusing on the social mishap between Catherine and Heathcliff. The disturbance between someone who's considered dirty creates a barrier between their respect and admiration. It is important to note that the Grange represents nobility and setting, so this all happens after that. These are my evidence and sub-arguments, again, broken down into my 3 paragraphs. There is a lot going on, I know. So again,
it's good to see that there's a lot going on. That's really good.
Yeah, so I'll just sort of summarize it a little bit. So marriage, courtship, and romance, I'm focusing more so on how Miss Bennet has her views on marriage and her daughters, and how this almost, well, it's opposite to how Mr. Bennet reflects to it. So I'm focusing on that quote about your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do. So stuff like that, and how to be fond of dancing was a certain step to falling in love. So again, just that clear relationship between the 2. Through rejection, pride, and gender, again, the 3 different points of rejection, which all happened at some type of social event, typically when dancing was involved, which was quite a big thing. So the first time when she's tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me. The second time when I could easily forgive his pride if he had not mortified mine. Oh, sorry, down a little bit more. Oops. 1 second, there we go. The second time, indeed, sir, I have not the least intention of dancing. I entreat you not to suppose that I move this way in order to beg for a partner. And the third time, which is sort of cut off my writing, I have therefore made up my mind to tell you that I do not want to dance a reel at all, and now despise him. That's those. Then my final paragraph is more so talking about the Christmas Eve when Catherine comes back from the Grange. Bronte glamorises Catherine's appearances, so all of her splendid garments, then almost talks down about Heathcliff. So after noting that she does not want Heathcliff's grimy hands on her clothes, Heathcliff gets defensive and a barrier is created between them, demonstrating a difference of social hierarchy. At the sense of his own inferiority, Heathcliff becomes defensive and cries out, "You needn't have touched me. I shall be dirty as I please, and I like to be dirty, and I will be dirty." Dirty is almost symbolic for the lower class through this little scene, although I would say they are like in love, and the dirt is what is always that discrepancy between them. That's hers. And here is my academic sources.
Thanks, Melissa. That was great. And I'm really happy someone chose the question on dance. Maybe a few others have chosen it on dance because it seems to run throughout all of the narratives we looked at. We didn't really get a chance to talk about dance when we looked at Pride and Prejudice. Do you think people still meet each other through dance today, or is that like a bygone thing?
Like maybe like clubbing, maybe not the same type of dance.
Well, they got to dance, don't they? What do they do when they go to the club?
It's not really dancing, is it?
Yeah, I'm not the person that gets let into those places. Not that I try to get in, but I imagine there's music and
yeah. I would say it's very, very different, but I did sort of struggle because the prompt is very, very like specific, like in terms of like dance, and like there's other things that I'd love to talk about, but like obviously I don't want to sway too much away from that.
No, there's room to move, but and move and groove, but it looks like you're right on the track. I'll give you lots of feedback. I think maybe you're all set up for Pride and Prejudice. It looks like Wuthering Heights is kind of the area that could need some kind of suggestions. But how are you feeling? Are you feeling positive?
You pretty much read exactly where mine's at. I'm very confident with Pride and Prejudice, but Wuthering Heights, I'm a bit like, well, I struggled to find information.
Yeah, there's not so much dancing in Wuthering Heights. There's just that one key scene. So you'll probably have to just focus on that. But yeah, I'll give you some feedback on that. But as a transition to the next speaker, did you know bees dance?
Pardon?
Bees waggle dance. Bees can dance. Bees have a, yeah. To point out where the flowers are, they have the waggle dance. Yeah. It took a crazy German 20 years to figure that out. Thanks, Melissa. I think next up we've got Dana, and I've just mentioned a few people have mentioned Ruby. You said I've submitted my assessment already, but I'm happy to go another time if we run out of time. No, I won't say it. Let's see how many we can get in, and then I'll have an announcement. But are you ready to go, Dana?
Yeah, all good. Okay.
I think it is a Mac problem that people are getting the thing there, because I think people with Macs are, I think Camille may have had a Mac as well.
So I am focusing on Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and the question is, oh, sorry, I've just got it, there we go. Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles is primarily a novel concerned with social criticism rather than romance discuss. So my thesis statement: in Tess of the D'Urbervilles, Hardy veers from traditional romantic fiction and divulges half-truths about 19th century society, whilst masterfully critiquing the disparagement of women and romance through Tess's untimely journey. So my scoping statement: the purpose of this essay is to highlight the ways in which Hardy exploits the pernicious nature of the society in which he lived. 3 main focal points will be discussed to anchor the argument statement. Firstly, the essay will discuss how Tess's treatment throughout the novel highlights gender oppression. By highlighting the ostracization of Tess due to her impurity after being sexually assaulted, Hardy examines how unappealing the notion of isolation can be on an individual. Finally, the way in which Hardy employs lust and romance to enhance a reader's perspective will also be discussed in conjunction with his blatant exposure of social fragility. And I do want to mention, originally I had paragraph 1 was going to focus on gender oppression and class, and then paragraph 2 was going to focus on isolation and religion. And then when I actually started trying to find some quotes and everything, it was just getting so out of hand. So I decided to cut them down so each paragraph will only focus on one idea or concept. That's not getting rid of how important class and religion are in the novel, especially if you are going to take a Marxist view to reading Hardy's novel. You will obviously look at how class works. But I do briefly touch on class in comparison to Tess's relationship with Alec, which I will explain now. So the first sub-argument is going to be a critique of gender oppression. And Hardy integrates the oppression of gender throughout the novel in numerous ways, most importantly through the relationship of Tess and Alec. The relationship not only highlights the toxic masculinity presented for males in society, but also the power they had over lower class patrons. quotes such as, "Let the truth be told, women do as a rule live through such humiliations and regain their spirits, and again look about them with an interested eye," which obviously discusses that women are almost expecting to fail in society and they have to live with this burden of shame and then be brought back up again, whereas there's no mention of a man having to live with the shame. And also, an immeasurable social chasm was to divide out our heroine's personality. And that's kind of foreshadowing what's coming next with Tess. And it's discussing the verge of her being a young lady and a woman, and how for a man, he just grows up, he's a teenager, he's a man, that's it. For a woman, they're in that very fine stage where she's young and she's innocent, and then she's impure the second she's an adult. And something that I came across when I was reading, which really interested me, was the original text is actually, a subheading is "A Pure Woman Faithfully Presented," which is, you read the title and you read that straight underneath, which actually underlines Hardy's stance on the treatment of women. So we already have an idea of where he stands with gender oppression in society. And I just do have two references. So Key examines the gender power in the novel. She discusses Alex grooming upon Tess. So because she is pliant, because he owes her life effectively, because he takes her in, he's able to groom her. When that scene actually does come to play, she is a lot more, willing to what is about to happen. And furthermore, Shakri discusses that Tess is a woman who tries to diverge her own path, yet she remains shackled to society's idea of duties and self-preservation. The second paragraph is going to actually talk about isolation. So the treatment of Tess is disparaged throughout the entire text, with her ultimate demise at the end of the novel leaving readers feeling unsettled and alone. Hardy points out how isolating Tess's oppression is, using the recurring motif of nature. And I'm still trying to figure out how nature quite plays into it, but it wasn't in a lot of the articles I read. So I'm trying to see how I can weave that in. Some of the quotes: "She was not an existence, an experience, a passion, a structure of sensation to anybody but herself," which Christoph actually says she's comparing her self-awareness with the indispensable nature of life. So instead of it being a liberating moment for Tess realizing that she is her own person, it's almost a moment of she is alone. There isn't liberation in being your own person when there's nobody around to share that with. And then her flexuous and stealthy nature figure became an integral part of the scene. And that is talking about how straight away it's her looks that get noticed, not her actual self, which again is quite isolating for a female in this era, because they are purely based on looks. A man doesn't care if she can read or write. They don't want autonomy in a woman. They just want someone who can give them babies and cook for them. And an interesting article I read, George discusses how the landscape and trees are prominent in the story, as well as Tessa's isolating journey. And there's just a recurring motif of the different trees in different scenes, which can emulate other moments. And I think it's quite fascinating to think about the trees are in the background. They're not something that's mentioned often. And at the end of the novel, Tess is effectively in the background herself. She is not herself. She's someone else. She has been belittled in this society, and that in itself is isolating, not being able to be yourself. So that was an interesting connection I made between the landscape and Tess. And then for my last sub-argument, I actually focused on the romantic undertones shown throughout the text. So it obviously wasn't meant to be pitched as a romantic novel. He was clearly critiquing the society in which he lived. But he does offer the innocence of Tess and Angel's courtship in the beginning, which can satiate the reader for their hunger for lust and romance, especially in the time it was released. And something interesting I noticed was he uses social fragility as the main part of his novel, with undercurrents of romance, which is in complete contrast to Jane Austen, who I believe she used romance as a smokescreen to then highlight the discourse in society. So they're exact opposites. And I know they're at tail end of the century, but it's quite interesting how both novels are revered and uplifted in society for their, groundbreaking nature. But one focuses on romance with underlying tones of realism. One focuses on realism with underlying tones of romance. And a couple of the quotes, her affection for him was now the breath and life of Tessa's being. Just that's discussing how she feels for Angel and how she just becomes a whole woman now that she is with this man she thinks she's going to spend the rest of her life with. And also, they were not perfect, and it was the touch of the imperfect upon the would-be perfect that gave the sweetness, because it was that which gave the humanity. And I think that's, again, a very realistic approach to romance that Hardy writes. He is showing that romance can be seen in this society, but it is not what it's all added up to be. It is not meet, fall in love, that's the end. And a lot of people did have to find the imperfection to see its beauty. And just a couple of references in there. So Hazen discusses the romantic portrayal of Angel, with his social stances being somewhat similar to Hardy himself. It's actually a really interesting article if anyone wants to read it. It discusses how Hardy may have unforeseenly emulated himself in some of Angel, especially in the earlier days where, you know, he's not afraid to go and dance when the rest of his brothers and everyone around him were kind of a little bit apprehensive. And then another article I found just highlights the romanticization of Angel and Tess and their attraction and lust towards one another, which is kind of key because we see throughout the novel how he leaves, he eventually is okay with everything and comes back. And that leads back to that idea of innocent love and romance. And then there are my references.
Oh, well done, Dana. That was, I don't think you're going to have any problem writing your essay. It's a question of getting all of that in 1,500 words. Is it going to be hard?
Yeah.
I found it interesting because the key word you kept referring to throughout that was isolation, which kind of, I'll be very interested to read about that because, yeah, I've read a lot of essays on Tessa de D'Urbervilles, but no one's really ever focused on isolation. Is that something kind of that you kind of noticed throughout your reading of the novel?
Yeah, I find it really, obviously being the novel that it is, I think with everything that happens to her, and I know it's different in the times that they were in, but she really is alone in everything. You know, yes, she has her family. Yes, she has Angel for some time, but she really discovers how to be a woman and how to try survive in this society completely on her own. And there's no help from anyone. She is just completely cast out for a mistake that wasn't even her own. So I think it is really interesting. And a lot of some of the stuff that I have been reading about it, it's that contrast between, is she liberated because she's found herself, or is she just completely at a point of, I have no one else, who else am I going to be but me? So it's that kind of balancing line, which I'm really interesting reading the different articles I'm finding.
No, yeah. And would you describe her as a hero?
Oh, I see. I think she's more victim than hero. And she's broken, which I think we all are. So it's a completely realistic portrayal of just a human who's just trying to fumble her way through life, like we all are.
Yeah. No, I completely agree that she's a victim, but there's some wonderful moments in the text where she behaves very heroically, and I don't think I do think people would behave like that, really, really good people, really strong people, but she's a very heroic victim. I know we've got to push on, but I did want to ask, do you think what she does in the end is right?
You know, interesting enough, I'm going to compare it to pop culture for a minute, because I think it's the similar situation with what happened with the Oscar slap last week. I think there is no right or wrong answer. I completely feel why she did what she did. However, like, violence is not the answer. And I do think, has Alec actually suffered in any way? Because I think the biggest suffering is having to live with the guilt every day, which he doesn't have to do. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. He dies very quickly. Sorry, guys, if you're getting to the end of the novel, but she gets him right in the heart. Thanks, Dana. That's going to be a cracker of an essay. And I really it sounds like you really enjoyed the novel as well, as much as you can enjoy a novel like Tessa de D'Urbervilles. I think we've got some people offering to go next in the chat. Was that you, Inja? Would you like to go? And then I think a few people have gone. Amber's says, I want to go. And then I believe Alana. Oh, no. I'll go after Alana. And then Sorry, and then Kathleen. Okay. Do you want to go, Inja?
Yeah, I'll go.
I should mention that Inja's not too well at the moment, so she's being very heroic in going. So,
Guys, I have COVID. All right. So yeah, I'm a bit short of breath. So if I keep stopping to breathe, I'm sorry. It's really hard at the moment. All right. How do I
think that's in the rubric as well. Shortness of breath. Marks lost.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Screen for everyone.
I can see it.
All right, thank you. All right. So this is my assessment 2. I'll go on. So mine is about the landscape. So my main argument is that, I just need to move this so I can see it. Okay. Depiction of landscape can be symbolic of both character personification and representation of romance and realism in both Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights. So my scoping statement of things I'm going to be focusing on, the descriptions of the environment in Pride and Prejudice and the way that Austen uses like her descriptions of the landscape to kind of symbolize character development. And I'm also going to try and incorporate details of romance. I haven't gone as into detail as a lot of other people have. So yeah, but anyway, that's kind of what I want to go for. And then in my second paragraph, I want to focus on how Bronte uses the landscape, her descriptions of it, and the weather as a metaphor throughout her novel to depict characters in a certain way. And that I want to incorporate some details of realism in that one. And then in my third paragraph, I want to talk about the importance of landscape in 18th century literature as a whole. So why it's important, why it was important for them to incorporate landscape and, details about it all. So yeah. Oh, that didn't work. Hold on. Okay. So argument 1. So like I said before, descriptions made throughout the novel are arguably a symbolic description of characters. So I think someone said this earlier, so who was doing the same as me, so that works out well. How Mr. Darcy, when Pemberley is described, it's described as a large, handsome stone building. And then it could also be argued that it's, why did I write Ma Darcy? Anyway, it can be symbolic of Mr. Darcy because he's handsome and he's got high status. Another thing is that Elizabeth also travels from low elevation to high elevation when she first meets Mr. Darcy. So it could foreshadow her rise in status through her marriage as well. So it's kind of just how the links go together with the landscape, if it makes sense. All right, next one. Bronte uses descriptions of the landscape as a metaphor to give Heathcliff's character deeper meanings. And I feel like she does it as well to persuade the reader to feel a certain way about him and to foreshadow his character development. So whenever Bronte describes Heathcliff, it's always dark weather or stormy and that kind of thing. So I think I'm going to try and argue the fact that she wants the readers to know that he's not the kindest person in the world and that he's got a deeper meaning behind him. So that's why I said like foreshadow his character development, how he kind of changes into this nasty person. Sorry, I can't think of bigger words at the moment. Excuse me. All right, the third one. So this is how I want to talk about the landscape and why it was important to help readers understand the bigger picture. And I also was going to talk about how landscape can be seen as a metaphor and a symbol in many 18th century novels. So I found a reference, which is on my last page here, Landscape in Literature by Salter. That explains a lot about why landscape, like why 18th century novels included landscape in their novels. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm trying to come up with words, but yeah, it's got a lot of information in there that I want to incorporate. So yeah, that's basically it. Sorry guys for that disaster.
No, that was great. That was pretty. It was pretty good, Inja. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I did think one of the interesting things you mentioned, that I know it's probably just a quirky little fact. You mentioned that Elizabeth travels up from Longbourn, from Hertfordshire to Derbyshire. Does anyone know what happens when Tess goes from the Blackmore Vale to Trantridge? What direction should she go in? She goes down. She goes down. She has a fall. It's a really quirky geographical type of thing, but romances are bizarre and they tend to go up. And when you look at the spatial geography, they tend to go down. Northcote Fry had this theory that romances always go up. If they're from a lower place, they'll always go up. And you see that with Lydia's fall as well. Lydia goes down towards the coast from Longbourn to Brighton. How are you feeling, Inja? Are you glad that's over and done with?
Yeah, I'm glad. I haven't tried speaking much today, so I think trying to get that was hard, but thanks for listening to me, guys.
No, I'll have plenty of feedback to give you, but it looks like you're on the right track. And
I was worried that my arguments weren't like in depth enough, because obviously I've seen some other people's today and they had more in-depth stuff. So I was just a bit worried about that, but hopefully
Yeah. The only advice I can give you there in a sense is to, when you start prosecuting the arguments you've got, always see where they take you, and then go back after you've written the whole essay and think about, haven't I made some other more complicated arguments at the beginning? Sorry, go on. No, you go. I
think that's my issue. I don't ever really plan out an essay. So in the last few units, I've had to plan it out, and I don't like planning. I just like start writing and then I go back and add stuff in. And I think, a few people are the same last unit.
Yeah,
so
I think
come up with,
I think Dana's nodding, and I do think I myself never wrote essay plans. I think the block model, they've instituted the essay plan. Think of the essay plan as more just to get you thinking and researching. It's not written in stone. You noticed a lot of other people had 2 possible thesis statements. Nothing's set in stone. I'm not going to get your plan out and read your long essay and go, oh, they don't match. This is no good. Go with kind of use the plan as just starting kind of research. Thanks, India. You're very heroic in doing that with COVID. You deserve a medal of some sort, which I can't give you because I don't have any medals, but if I had medals, I'd give you one. I've got now on the list Amber, Alana, Kathleen. Is that the next direction? Are you ready to go, Amber?
Yep, sure am. Apologies if my son runs in. He might, hopefully not.
He'll steal the show. Hopefully not.
He loves doing that, so wouldn't surprise me. Okay. Let me know if you can. Oh, wait, hang on. I started presenting without screen sharing. Hang on 2 seconds. Hang on 1 second. Sorry, it's being funny.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay. Oh yeah, it's doing the system preferences thing.
Is it because do you have a Mac?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It must be everyone that has a Mac has that thing come up.
Oh, hang on. Here he comes.
We just borrowed my iPad too.
So yeah. Go lie down. Go lie down. Sorry.
That's okay.
I hope that works because it just said it would have to shut down. Oh no.
It's probably. Do you want us to jump ahead and then come back to you?
Yeah, I might have
Is
to
that
restart my computer.
Yeah, okay. Well, hopefully it's go ahead and do that and then we'll come back to you. Do you want to go, Alana?
I can, but I have a Mac as well, so I might have the same issue, but I'll give it a go.
Does anyone who's been using a Mac have any advice for Amber or Alana?
I have a Mac and it was fine, but I think it's because I've done it in another unit. I had to do that as well, the system preferences, but then when I went to share, I didn't have to restart it. So you might not have to restart it.
Yeah, I think mine looks like it's going to work if this one's...
Yeah.
All right, can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay, so...
You're doing dance as well.
I am doing dance as well. So I'm doing essay question 7. Dance appears in all the novels you've read in this unit. In Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy infamously refuses to ask Lizzie to dance. In Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff is excluded from the Christmas dance, and Tess opens with a dance. Focusing on dance in 2 or 3 of these novels, consider the importance dance holds with respect to romance, realism, class, and gender. So the thesis statements, I've, like a few other people, have put 2 here because I'm not 100% sure how I want to do this. So the first one is, in the novels Pride and Prejudice, Wuthering Heights, and Tess of the D'Urbervilles, dance is used by each of the authors as a tool for conveying messages of social class and gender representation in rural gentry subculture, as well as being central to manoeuvring the plot. And the other one that I've put here is, in 18th century England, where each of these texts are set, dance is used as a central part of the representation of romance. It has been used both to convey the character's intentions symbolically and realistically, and foreshadow later events. I know they're both a little bit vague, so I'm still working on summarizing in one kind of sentence the point I sort of want to get across about how, like, dance is the way in these novels they create kind of a reason for character interaction and have a dramatic, engaging scenes with key plot points. And that's kind of how they did that and had everyone in the one place. Okay. Oh. Sorry, guys. Let me just... Oh, I'm not sure what's happened there. Hang on. Let me just pull that back up. Sorry, everyone.
No, it's this is the nature of Zoom. Don't apologize. It's
all over. Okay, it's just loading for me to get it back up. Here we go. All right, can we all see that? Are we back?
Yep.
Okay. So for my scoping statement, first part in this essay, I will be discussing the roles of dance in each of the novels and how it can be representative of social inclusion or exclusion and show readers plainly the class barrier among characters. So here I kind of plan to discuss or like use the example of Heathcliff being excluded from that Christmas dance that they had, and how that was kind of because he was like the poor, not part of like that gentry kind of upper class standing of people. In the first section of my essay, I will include commentary on the way in which writers at the time used dancing to describe characters and give the readers a better understanding of their personality and other characters' perception of them. I will also discuss the use of dance scenes in the literature to show traditional romantic gestures of courtship and how dances were a place, like the setting, that romantic agency and physical intimacy could be expressed, when at this sort of time there were not many other ways to acceptably do that, like especially in public, because it was kind of, if women were seen doing that, they were kind of shamed for that sort of thing. So to go into that a bit further, my sub-arguments, I would like to discuss how Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley are first introduced at a dance, and Austen kind of puts the reader into the room with the characters when describing them. So I think this is a good example of realism in Austen's first description of Darcy. Like, she kind of does this on purpose to not describe him visually, because she wants the readers to kind of find him handsome. So she leaves it kind of to the reader's imagination and create that picture of him by putting us into the situation. You kind of feel like you're in that room at the dance as part of the gossipy mothers who are turning their noses up when they realise how unpleasant he is to interact with. And of course, this is where the famous scene happens that he rejects Lizzie and refuses to dance. She also does mention later on in the novel that Darcy is a very skilled dancer, which is something that would be considered attractive and indicative of wealth at the time, which I think would be good to contrast with Mr. Collins, who is described as not a very good dancer, and he's described as like kind of awkward and apologising, and it's really embarrassing for Lizzie to be seen dancing with him. For my second sub-argument, I'd also like to elaborate on her Austen's descriptions with Mr. Collins, as I said before, versus the way she describes Mr. Darcy straight afterwards when she dances with him. The third point, as I said before, would be addressing in Wuthering Heights how Heathcliff is excluded from the Christmas dance. And to bring in Tess, I would like to discuss the first introduction of Tess and Angel and their interaction in that first chapter when they're at the May Day dance. And how May Day is kind of like a celebration of spring and the newness and purity of the season. So Tess meeting Angel for the first time here, even though they don't dance together and she's all dressed in white, I think is very symbolic of the way in which he sees her like being like pure and white and dressed like that. And then it contrasts to how he rejects her later on because he finds out about that she's not so pure and innocent and all that sort of thing. So for my references, I haven't got a whole lot yet, but this one, the Roll of Country Dance, I think Chris recommended in the discussion of this essay topic. I had a look at this this one, which I think is, even though it's centered around discussing Pride and Prejudice and specifically Austen's writing, I think it's applicable to the other novels as well, because she's saying that pretty much like she opens it up by saying it kind of achieves three effects. It reflects like the realistic activities and values of rural gentry kind of subculture, and she enables the reader to feel at home in her fiction. The second thing she also talks about is the dance setting brings together so many varied people. So like from the different kind of class variations there, which gives opportunities to maneuver the plot elements of like courtship and marriage and all that sort of thing. And then the dance setting also provides lots of opportunities for her to define and emphasize the personal qualities of the characters without explicitly saying things about their personality, like through the dancing. And those are all things that I definitely want to talk about in my essay. So I just need to do a bit more research and get some more references to back that up with.
Cool. Thanks, Alana. That was great. Yeah, I think another book I could mention is someone wrote a book called Jane Austen and Mozart, which looks at the geometry of dance and the actual structure of Pride and Prejudice. But that it's a very complicated book. But you will find, if you seek it out, you'll find a lot on dance in particularly Pride and Prejudice. But you might find a little bit on dance in Wuthering Heights, but you will find stuff on dance in Thomas Hardy's fiction. I know that because I've had a look around, and there's definitely.
I did also want to ask you, Chris, just while we're on the subject of Thomas Hardy's novels, are we allowed to kind of mention other novels that he's written, or do we have to keep it strictly to the ones we've discussed in class?
You can mention them, definitely, but your main focus should be on Tess. But I would be perfectly fine if you include dance from other novels, because there's a lot of dancing going on.
Especially like I wanted to mention like in Far From the Madding Crowd, how that's like a key climax of the plot was when they're at that ball and everything.
Boldwood opens up.
Boldwood, I thought that would be a good one to bring up because there's a lot more dancing in that than there is in Tess, but you have to focus on that.
You can. What you'd want to bring, I know we're struggling for time here, but try to bring your knowledge of other texts kind of in to support your argumentation for what's going on in those texts. So definitely kind of look at what's going on in Far From the Madding Crowd when it comes to dance as a way of kind of bringing everyone together, because that's what it does. I love Boldwood. He's such a funny character. Thank you. Once again, be sure to upload that to Collaborate. Amber's back. And do you want to give it another go, Amber?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. I think it's okay now. Let me know if can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Can you see like the presenter?
Yep.
Okay. So this is my essay plan. I chose essay question 5, the social problem one. You've heard it before, so I don't have to read it again. Hang on. I am not very good with technology, so just give me a moment.
That's all right. That's all right.
Okay, so this is my thesis statement. Thomas Hardy's Test of the d'Urbervilles uses realism in the form of social commentary and romance in the form of romantic timing and tragedy to discuss the double standards and injustices Tess d'Urberville faces throughout the novel, focusing on the oppression and inequity of women in the Victorian era, which is compounded by class, status, and society's obsession of a pure woman. So this is my scoping statement. So the first part of the essay will focus on Tessa's desire to become a new woman through her ambitions of becoming a teacher and her need to be a pure woman to be socially accepted by the society, and her fate of becoming the fallen woman, tarnished by Alex's actions and left with a child. Her life changes forever and Alex is left the same. Discussion around the intersectionality between gender and class and how that influences Tess' circumstances and fate. I'll also discuss the difference in the way Hardy uses a naturalism to show the progression of Tessa's loss of innocence and purity, and romanticism in the form of Alex's character representation and turpitude, timing of events, tragedy, and the relationship between Alec and Tess. Second paragraph will focus on Hardy's use of hypocrisy to draw attention to the commentary about social inequities of women, which can be seen with Angel's obsession with her purity and virtue. However, it is one thing that Tess lacks, kind of a bit of irony as well. Angel does not value Tess for her strength or intelligence, and Hardy's feminist discourse throughout this novel reflects that obsession with the pure woman again. Discussion will also be held on Angel's obsession with religion and the hypocrisy between Angel's indiscretion and Tess's, and then focus on the cyclical pattern of romantic timing and tragedy, the juxtaposed realism of the Victorian era. And finally, the concept of sacrifice will be investigated, focusing on religious sacrifice, the inescapable reality of sacrifice for the lower class, and the idea of romantic sacrifice for the one you love. And that'll be shown through Tess's assault and death and its religious undertones, Mrs. d'Urberville's apathetic sacrifice of Tess, and Tess's sacrifices for love until she dies. So yeah, I'm going to have to condense this a bit because it's kind of like 6 essays in one, but I'll get there. These are all my limitations. I don't really have to go through them because I'm not going to write about them. But yeah, just a brief synopsis of this. So the first one is paragraph 1, which is that new and pure woman versus the fallen woman. So like I said before, talking about the modernization of the time and Tessa's ambition, and then how she progresses to a fallen woman, and focusing on class as an important role, because I think that's the only part of the essay question that I kind of disagreed with, just a little bit at the end, saying that gender has primacy over class. I don't know if I 100% agree with that. I feel like they're intertwined. And that Alec kind of becomes like a necessary evil that hardens Tess. That's kind of the way that I think Hardy's writing him. And she is irredeemable, obviously, after she murders Alec to Angel. So I've got some quotes there. I don't want to take up everyone's time, so I'll just skip through that. Second one is focusing on hypocrisies again. So the way that Alec treats her is just like one great big hypocrisy, really. Angel, how he got to sleep with a woman, and then Tess really quickly forgives him, but she is like dead to him. Tess thinks that Angel is sick and dying because she rejected him, like the ridiculousness of that. Alec is not even a d'Urberville, like everything is just completely ridiculous in this whole novel. And there's all my quotes down the bottom. And then the last one is the sacrifice. So there's when Prince dies and she sacrifices herself. Her father kind of sacrificing her child because he's like not worthy, so he doesn't get to be baptized. it goes on. I've got a lot and I need to condense this, but I kind of went on a manic like rage and just did this.
Yeah, I've seen this before actually. No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing, but I have seen this before. Not this presentation, not the content, but I've seen a lot of people read Test of the D'Urbervilles and go, "Oh, there's so much here. What do I talk about?" Because
honestly, the book is so full of so much and so much social commentary. It's really hard to pick it apart. And I think I chose the worst question because it's so broad. But yeah. Anyway, so this is a possible reference, just talking about the romantic timing, which is kind of like the big part of my essay, which would be the romantic timing and then the realist aspect and also the naturalism that kind of intertwines between both. And these are all my possible references, but don't know yet. So yeah.
This is a great map. It's a great starting point for sketching out like what you want to look at. I almost feel like it could be good to formulate a specific research question to do with a certain area that you may be particularly interested in, because remember you asked a question a couple of, I don't know, when we first had our first session on TESS about paganism and Christianity. And I've been rereading the novel this week, and some of you may have noticed how, I think Dana mentioned it a little bit in her presentation, just how critical Thomas Hardy was of the Christian themes in Test of the D'Urbervilles, and almost the kind of relationship to this kind of patriarchal godlike figure that kind of controls the narrative. You mentioned sacrifice throughout the entire kind of discussion here, and that kind of is what happens in the end of Tess, and it's what makes it a tragedy in a way, is that people end up being sacrificed to appease social values and social norms. But I do think, perhaps by way of feedback, I could suggest what areas are really interesting you here, and that hopefully will may be able to get you to refine it down. But this is a great start, Amber. And yeah, I've had a lot of students in the past that have had this problem where there's so much in Test of the D'Urbervilles, they don't know where to begin. It's just a whole kind of like, did the novel really speak to you in many ways?
Yes, yeah. And I found his commentary my favorite part, but I also find commentary on gender and class very difficult to write about because there's just so much to write about that I kind of knew I was setting myself up for disaster, but I didn't want to choose something that I wasn't passionate about. So it was like a double-edged sword, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah, I think the key will be to write it out and then come back to it and say, you know, I may have 6 essays here. Which essay do I want to kind of carve out of all of this stuff? But yeah, that's great, Amber. It's great that you've kind of gone to such lengths to kind of really kind of sketch out where you want to go. It's very similar to Dana's in a way in terms of the profound depth. And it's weird, you only really ever see that with Test of the D'Urbervilles, to be honest. Not always, but Tess seems to really provoke heaps of interest and heaps of analysis, which is what it's all about. So thank you. Who did I have down next after? I had Kathleen, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, would you like to go, Kathleen?
Yeah, I'll just share my screen. Okay, so my essay question is, Hardy's Test of the D'Urbervilles is primarily a novel concerned with social criticism rather than romance. Discuss. So did it lag?
Yeah, I'm seeing kind of, now it's there. Oh, it's back. Now we're at the thesis statement.
So my thesis statement is Test of the D'Urbervilles is categorized as a romance novel. In this essay, I will argue about how it is not about romance, but rather a critique of society at the time. The social norms benefited men while undermined women and their ability to live their lives. The novel follows the path of a young girl growing up in the Victorian age, where Hardy suggests the disadvantages of being a woman of low class during this time period. So my scoping statement, the first part of the essay will focus on how Tessa's background leads to her ultimate downfall. There'll be discussion on the lower class, which leads to her parents' greed, lack of worldly experience, and hence naive behavior. The second part of the essay will focus on how the process of romantic courtship allows men to take advantage of unsuspecting women, or in Tessa's case, an unsuspecting girl. Their behavior is enabled under the pretense of being romantic when most times there is an ulterior motive. The third part of the essay will focus on the pressures of society placed on women. The society's oppression will be viewed through Angel and the church's perspective. So for my first argument, Hardy criticizes the class system and how it disadvantages the low working class while benefiting those of high class and wealth. When Tessa's working class family lose Prince, their main source of income, for their family, this meant being on the brink of poverty, but for other families, it would only have meant inconvenience. The family's greed and vanity was the beginning of Tessa's demise. They played on her empathy and responsibility, guilt-tripping her into going to a stranger's house for financial assistance. Alec, a wealthy man, was able to impregnate a girl of lower class and suffered no societal consequence. Argument 2, the process of romantic courtship allowed men to take advantage of women under the pretense of romance. Social norms dictated a woman's actions until they accepted a proposal. Even in marriage, women were still oppressed by so many different ways. This is seen in Tess as she had to be polite and submissive, while Alec was forcing her to eat a strawberry and forcing her to kiss him, or he kissed her. Before he assaulted her, he also said, I love you and I think you are the prettiest girl in the world. He also gifted her family a horse and her siblings new toys before taking something important and precious from her. He saves her on horseback only to take her to the woods and assault her, ruining her chances of having a normal life in the society. Argument 3, society's laws are strict and blindly followed by the people. Angel had experience of women and had spent 48 hours alone with an older woman, but because of society's double standards, he couldn't accept Tess for her involuntary assault while his actions were of his own accord, while she had been made to break an accepted social law. In society's eyes, Tess was impure and could not come back from Alec's actions, despite this being outside of her control. The double standard for men who can do whatever they want, but for Tess, her life was essentially over. People are ingrained with a double standard attitude towards chastity, which means a cheating husband can be accepted, but a woman who lost virginity will be disdained. As a result of Alec's immoral action, Tess is considered a sinner. After he leaves her, she's forced back to her abuser, which eventually leads to the end of her life. She was a regular churchgoer and a good Christian. When she went to baptize her child, she wanted to do the right thing. She was refused due to her illegitimacy. After her child passed away, she went to bury the child through the church, but they refused. She was shamed and unaccepted due to actions outside of her control. Angel's family were representations of the church. They never accepted her as a milkmaid, let alone as an impure woman. They do not go to her wedding, and even when Angel leaves her and she goes to them for help, they shame her into leaving. And there's my references.
That was great, Kathleen. That was fantastic. I particularly liked your sub-argument number 2, which kind of, I don't know. Sorry, does someone want to say something?
Oh, I was just saying it mostly came from the email.
I like the other arguments as well, but I do think one of the things you do see in Tess is the way romance itself gets criticized. But it really seems like you know the novel quite well. How are you feeling about writing your essay?
Okay, it's just I think more of the thesis statement. Like it's hard to, like I guess you're right. Like when I start writing it, when I go back, hopefully like the thesis statement will come to me. But I don't really love what I have right now.
It was pretty good. It's a working thesis statement. That's the best advice I can give. The advice I give always is work with what you've got and give yourself time to come back, because you'll find the process of writing is often kind of, it's not this ideology or causation where everything's in your brain and you need to get it onto paper and then it's there. You'll find that the process of getting it onto paper, your brain starts working with the writing, and it's kind of a wonderful kind of connection that goes on. But yeah, give yourself time to come back and think about your thesis statement. Likewise with your conclusion, because your conclusion and your thesis should really match each other. I was going to ask, does anyone who's doing tests the same question have any questions for Kathleen? Are they helpful in any way, looking at what other people are doing? Yeah, I think so. It's 8:23 now. Who would like to go next?
I can go next.
All right, Murari. Murari, I've got you down for next. Would anyone like to go after Murari?
Can I go after her? Oh, sorry.
No, Renz.
I'm
and
totally down for whoever's next.
and there was someone else.
It was me.
And Shania. Renz, Shania. Okay. Yeah. Would you like to go, Murari?
Yep. Something's happening with my camera. Can you see me?
I can see you.
Oh, it's blank on my screen. Okay, never mind. I'll share my screen. Just 1 second. Everyone see that?
I can see it. Yep.
Sweet. Yes. Yes. Okay. Right. So, excuse me. I'll start off. So, my thesis is in this paper, I'll be studying the presentation of environment. Oh, hang on, this is in the way. Sorry. I'll start again. In this paper, I'll be studying the representation of environment in literature and how it links to the romance and realism aspect of two novels by Jane Austen and Thomas Hardy. My argument will consist of how land or environment are used to identify hierarchy and prosperity in the characters from the Pride and Prejudice and test of the D'Urbervilles. I will also seek to link illustration to environments as well as personification, class, and gender. Lastly, I will explore why these two authors may have chosen to do this. All right, so scoping statement. In the first part of this essay, I will explore the intricacy of class and gender in the 18th century and how it had great influence in the social normality during that time. I will dig deeper into where women fit in these social classes, and both novels have represented women thus far. The second half of this essay will cover the usage of land and environment as a metaphor to represent the hierarchy of class gender within the novels. For example, Mr. Darcy is a master of a great estate in Pemberley. I'm able to draw on one or two articles to back my argument of how land establishes the context and personification of the story and importance of these connections. The third part of my essay will loosely cover the idea of prosperity and how it may link to Tess from Tess of the D'Urberville in the realism aspect of her misfortune. As an example, Tess being lured to sleep with Alec. Finally, focus will be drawn to the realism aspect in both novels, discussing themes such as spring, representing purity in Tess, and less about the influence of romance. With this in mind, I intend to shine a light on the connection of land and how it is used to give identity to the main characters in both novels. So saga arguments, Tess of D'Urberville. The landscape in chapters 1 to 3 provides the settings for the novel. The May, for example, the May Day dance is a symbolic ritual of purity and springtime. So in the same book, but in chapter 6, Alec is described to be taking advantage of Tess sexually while she was asleep. So Tess again, in chapter 16 to 19, Tess finding work as a milkmaiden. The new landscape represents a fresh beginning. And then one from Pride and Prejudice. These aren't all set in stone. I'll probably have a few more to add in. Pride and Prejudice, chapter 6 to 9, Elizabeth is described walking alone to the Neverfields. And that's my bibliography, and there will, again, still be a few added into that as well. That's about it.
Thanks, Mawari. It looks like it's shaping up.
Thank you.
Looks like Tess has given you a lot to think about in terms of environment. It seems to be a lot more significant representations of landscape in Tess compared to Pride and Prejudice. So it'd be good to compare and contrast those two and kind of tie the way kind of landscape and character kind of work to represent certain things.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about it?
Still a bit nervous. I'm hoping that it is a strong essay at the end, but I've got some pretty good examples. I'm just hoping that I can manage to make it work.
Make it flow together. Yeah. Well, start as early as you can, because that's like the best way to do it. Get in early so that kind of you've got time to edit, and yeah, that's what I tend to do, is start very early.
Yep.
Thanks, Mawari. Please everyone upload your assessments to the Collaborate so I can give you feedback. Now I had Renz next.
Hello.
Hey Renz, how you going?
Shitting myself, diarrhea. Nervous.
That's a bit of realism.
All right, tell me about it. Alrighty. So I just did a Word document. Very, very surface level, very superficial. But here we go. So I did. Oh, am I frozen?
You've started sharing screen.
Okay, cool. So you can hear me fine though?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So the question I am doing is Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles is primarily a novel concerned with social criticism rather than romance discuss. So my thesis statement is the standard set by society in the 19th century often creates adversity for romance to flourish, which demonstrates how romance is often intertwined with hardship. I will be contending that Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles articulates the ever-pervading issue of inequality and how it affects the well-being of individuals and its ability to behave as an obstacle in the development of relationships. So my scoping statement, to start off my essay, I will be discussing how there is a power imbalance between genders, with women's freedom being limited by a metaphorical glass ceiling, and given the time period, make them kind of inherently vulnerable and helpless to the grotesque actions of men. This will then shift to exploring societal and religious attitudes and how it impacts the world's perspective of what is morally right and wrong. More specifically, this will be focused on rape, infidelity, and illegitimate children. And the third part of my essay will focus on social class and how it influences behaviour as well as the interactions between certain individuals. Given the time constraints, I won't be examining the intricacies of the specific type of religions in the novel, which I believe is like paganism or Christianity. But I'll mainly focus on how religion is weaponized within Tess of the D'Urbervilles. So in my sub-arguments, the first argument will focus on the rape of Tess and the constant harassment she receives from Alec. And like in the quotes that I'm like wrote down here, it's more so focusing on the scene where he is taking Tess back to Marlet, and then she's like, oh my gosh, slow down. And he's like, not going to stop until you let me kiss you. And so that's pretty much what is there. And she's saying, no, I don't want you, but eventually relents to it solely for safety or something like that, which is very representative of sexual assault and harassment. My second argument is Angel's contempt of Tess after the confession of her rape and the death of her child Sorrow. So in the quotes that I have here, it's mainly focusing on how she's, as all of you are aware, after the wedding, they confess about his infidelity, and then she's like, no, all good. It's like, don't worry, I've had something happen to me as well. And then she goes to say what happened to her, and he's like, no. And it's just that hypocrisy that, oh, he can do wrong, but it's okay. Whereas she's just completely ostracized from society, Angel, and the church when she's trying to bury her baby. And then the third sub-argument is kind of focusing on Angel Claire's family's perception of Tess and how they don't really accept her because of her lowly status as a milkmaid and her as an impure woman. That's pretty much what I have there. And then those are my references. I'm probably going to use more, but we shall see.
Great, Renz. How are you feeling about it? Are you feeling like nervous about presenting or writing your essay?
Writing my essay. Oh my gosh, this is a beast.
A beast. You should have chose Wuthering Heights then, if you wanted to.
Honestly, no. Like I do. I chose Tess of the D'Urberville because it is the most. What's the word? I can't think at the moment. It's just the most interesting, for lack of a better word. And I feel like I could write more about it, but we shall see how that goes.
No, it's looking like it's shaping up, and I look forward to giving you feedback. Be confident, believe in yourself, believe in your arguments, and it should go forward that way. It looks like kind of you've got a good working thesis statement. You know where you want to look for things. I kind of wouldn't be too worried. Just put in the time, and things will consolidate.
Thank you.
No worries. I think someone's smoke alarm may need a new battery. I just heard a little.
Been like that for years. Everyone in my house is too lazy to change it, and I'm too short, so sorry.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm sure your house won't go down, but yeah. Thanks, friends. Shania, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen. Okay, how do okay, can you guys see my screen? Right?
Yep, I can see it. I'm sure everyone else can.
Okay. So I'm doing Tess of the D'Urbervilles as well. So my question was, Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles is primarily a novel concerned with social criticism rather than a romance discuss. My thesis statement is, in this essay, I'll be arguing that Tess of the D'Urbervilles is primarily a novel concerned with social criticism. Although there are romance aspects within the novel, Hardy uses realism in this form of social criticism to portray how one societal criticism can be effective enough to lead to one's downfall. My scoping statement is, the first section will discuss what the social standards were for women in the late 19th century, in particular with sexual assault within Victorian England. This section will relate back to Tess's character and her being written as a pure woman and a woman who is considered modern for that time. It will discuss Miss D'Urberville being aware of social expectations and criticism, and therefore making herself the one who's primarily criticizing Tess, whether knowingly or not. Secondly, the essay will discuss social double standards which were present for men and women, especially in regard to sexual activity. This will touch on Angel and Tess's relationship, especially their relationship post-marriage and his need to comply with the societal rules in fear of criticism, along with their pursuit of love and Tess's pursuit as a direct opposition of social standards. Lastly, this essay will explore the detrimental effects of how society in the late 1890s viewed being raped and how it leads to a chain of events which occur in order to get back what Tess lost, due to the intensity and longevity of those criticisms leading to her downfall. This essay will not be focusing heavily on the birth and death of her son and the whisperings about her in Marlett after her return from Tandridge. The exclusions of these events are due to the fact that the arguments are solely based on how assault and not being a virgin was extremely criticized upon, and prevalent criticism has ongoing harmful effects rather than every possible criticism that was in the novel. So my first sub-argument is, Hardy presents Tess as a girl different to those around her, a pure and genuine soul who was written as a modern woman, and as a whole not understood and therefore criticized by the woman. Miss D'Urberville's want for Tess to wed results in her being critical in Tess's decisions, which she might not intend to do. However, it gives a slight glimpse in how society may react, which also may be a result of knowing the expectations. My second argument is Hardy uses realism covered by romance to show the impending criticism of Tess not being a virgin, leading to the post-marriage conversation between Angel and Tess, showing the double standards that were present about sex, and portrays the real-life narrative of how condemned things in society can be the sole reason of decision-making, as well as the fear of being associated with such a scandal. And my last argument is societal criticisms can change an entire person and lead them to act out of character. This explores how Tess ends up murdering Alec to get back the love which society took from her, and how this contrasts to the initial girl who was introduced in the book. And I put in all the chapters that are relevant to those events, and these are my references.
That was great, Shania.
Thanks.
I particularly liked your argument. It was very direct and it really answered the question. It sounds like you really knew the novel very well. Is that why you chose Tess?
Yeah, well, it was the only one I read. I didn't really pay attention, well, besides Pride and Prejudice, I didn't really pay attention to the others because I didn't even have the time. But yeah, I did really enjoy it. I just felt like at the beginning, I felt like I kind of limited myself with just focusing on that one particular thing instead of in general. But I think we got there.
No, I think you got there, and I think it's the central kind of thread to the whole novel is that this one concept of feminine purity and its violation kind of leads to someone becoming an outcast. So kind of it looks like you're really set up to write a very convincing argument. How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling okay. I think I can do it.
Yeah, I think you can do it, definitely.
Thank you.
I'm really feeling like it's 8:39 and is it my fault for not, I didn't want to tell people like, hey, you got to stop talking now because, you know, but I do feel like we're not going to be able to get through everyone in this session. Maybe we'll do a few more, and then the lucky last we have, I might ask you guys to go on Wednesday if that's okay. Would that be okay? It's just I don't want to hold you back beyond 9 o'clock because when I teach this unit normally it's like between 2 and 5, so people can like, you know, kind of Ruby saying, yep, I'll go on Wednesday. But I don't want to hold anyone back past 9 because it's getting quite late. It's a late class anyway. Would anyone like to go next? We've still got 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'll go.
All right, Ethan, go for it.
Actually, I closed it. 1 second.
What question have you chosen?
It's question 9. If it wants to.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Are you going to talk about Lady Chatterley's lover?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, thankfully, someone. Oh,
yeah, I thought it was be a bit different. I thought it'd be a bit interesting to do.
Yes. It's amazing. Everyone's done lots of the questions. This normally doesn't happen. Normally everyone does question 1. And no one's done question 1 yet. Go, Ethan, go.
Can everyone see that?
I can see it, yep.
Perfect. So as I said, I'm doing question 9, which is the relationship between Lydia Bennet and George Wickham is condemned by Elizabeth Bennet because of the primacy that passion is seen to take over both reason and virtue, whereas in Lady Chatterley's Lover, passion appears to be rendered into a virtue. So then I'm going to discuss how D.H. Lawrence departs from these predecessors and dealing openly with representations of human sexuality, and is the novel a work of romance or realism? So my thesis statement is the ideas of human sexuality have been continually explored in many novels with the tag of either romance or realism. Without one, the other cannot exist in said novels. In this essay, I will explore how the work of D.H. Lawrence in the novel Lady Chatterley's Lover is focused more on the romantic aspects of realistic relationships, whereas those authors who came before him, such as Jane Austen and her Pride and Prejudice, have focused more on the realistic aspects of romance. Each provides interesting insight into societal views on relationships and sexuality and how they can be influenced by premeditated social norms. This part's a bit wordy, so I'll try to slim it down a little bit. But for the first part of the essay, I'll try to talk about the similarities and differences between the two novels, and how Lady Chatterley's Lover is more focused on the romantic aspects with flashes of realism through it, whereas Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice is more focused on those realistic aspects of romance. In the second part of the essay, I'll explore the relationship between Lydia Bennet and George Wickham and the condemnation by Elizabeth Bennet, the reasons why such a relationship may be questioned at the time on a social level, and try to demonstrate how realistically social norms can shape a relationship. And then the third and final part, I'll talk about Lady Chatterley's Lover, and how the ideas of human sexuality, it's something more primal in the book, but it does need to be attended to over time to either nurture that relationship, or if it's not attended to, it'll eventually just die off. So the first sub-argument would be about the two novels and how they juxtapose one another, and highlight how relationships and sexuality are open to interpretation by those surrounding it. So in Pride and Prejudice, those relationships are viewed as somewhat transactional, and in some instances are kind of forced upon women to hold their societal status. While to juxtapose that, the relationships in Lady Chatterley's Lover are based on sexual attraction, and the judgment of others can really affect those relationships. So, for example, the disdain that's held by Mellor's old wife to not allow the divorce to take place, which means that the two main characters can't progress their love. It's also seen in a couple other relationships in the novel. The second argument would be human relationships and their sexual nature are confined and altered by social norms that are applied to it. And Austen tries to highlight how it can make or break those relationships. So to back that up, the view of society by those in society, such as Elizabeth, on the foundations of relationships between Lydia and George, places social norms on it that affects the way the two approach each other. And Austen highlights how relationships can be purely based on the realistic aspects of what people can gain from each other, and how they can propel themselves further in society. So it's kind of explored through chapter 50. And the final argument would be about D.H. Lawrence and how he tries to demonstrate that romance and sexuality are based on primal instincts and disregards the foundations placed by his predecessor Austen. The primal nature of sexuality and sexual attraction can be seen through the relationship of Connie and Mollers, whose interactions later in the novel can be based on pure primal attraction for one another, and the loss of that, from their previous relationship. And those will be my references. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Ethan. Big claps for choosing Lady Chatterley's Lover, because no one's chosen it. It's the first time it's been said as a text, and it's very problematic because we have no discussion on it before the essay is due, which is, how are you feeling about that? Are you feeling like you would need...
I think it would help to have the chat on it, but I think I'd be able to get through without it. It would be a little bit of a struggle, but I was a bit interested by the novel, so I thought I'd choose that.
Yeah. It's kind of the novel I set because we have Tess, which is a very traumatic novel, and then you get to Lady Chatterley's Lover, where it's very much more sex positivist in the sense that sex can be a very, very good thing. I mean, for Freud and a lot of people, and for Lawrence, it was very central to kind of the whole idea of being alive and what life is about. So it would be good to end on a high note. So thank you for choosing that question. I'm wondering, you'll probably be the only person, I'm imagining. But thanks. Yeah, I'll definitely give you some good feedback, hopefully. How are we going for time? It's 8:47. I think we can squeeze one more person in, perhaps. now everyone knows that they'll be going on Wednesday, so it's all silent now. What this means, though, is we've got through 17, and I think we've got maybe 3 or 4 or 5 people that are going to record theirs remotely. Maybe we'll have to finish them off on Lachlan. You can go. Would you like to go, Lachlan?
I'll fill in the last 5 minutes or so. Thanks
Great.
everyone for staying back. I know not everyone really needs to. Mine's the Word document, nothing exciting.
What question did you choose?
I believe question 4. Oh, my Word's doing this weird thing where it's putting all the letters and stuff. Can you see that? Like, it's all glitchy looking.
Yeah, it is a bit glitchy looking. I don't know, kind of, you got a curious Word.
Yeah, I'll close it and open it back up. All right, now it's looking a bit better. Right, can you see it?
Yep.
Yep. I do apologize. I can't remember what the question was, but it was Wuthering Heights predominantly displays romantic narrative elements, including elements of Gothic genre. Discuss whether this is an accurate description of this novel. So my thesis statement was both Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice use romantic narrative elements within their stories, although in differing ways. These elements include relationships, beauty of characters, and the settings in which the texts take place. So my scoping statement, within this essay, I'll be discussing the many varying narrative elements of romance illustrated between Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights. The first key point of discussion that will be outlined in this essay is on the emphasis of the beauty of characters written by Austen and Bronte. Secondly, it will discuss the way in which class plays a significant role in the choices of love by 2 sets of characters from each text. And the final part of this essay will outline the ways in which the use of setting or location assists in solidifying the idea of romanticism. Due to time restraints and limitations, I'll be unable to go into great depths when discussing the relationships of multiple characters across the 2 novels, and therefore I'll only be focusing on primarily on the protagonists of each given text. So argument 1, Austen's Pride and Prejudice is written with a much more rational, lighthearted take on the romantic elements compared to Bronte's Wuthering Heights, which is arguably displayed with much darker and upfront tone. When Austen describes the beauty or repulsiveness of a specific character, she uses such a unique language, which allows for the reader to be able to paint a simple yet clear picture of each first set characters. A prime example of this writing is within the description of Mr. Darcy, whom is believing he, within the description of Mr. Darcy, whom is, gotta move that around, introduced as being a fine figure of a man. The ladies declared he was much handsomer than Mr. Bingley, and so forth. From this description, the reader understands that Mr. Darcy is truly handsome man of good physique and an even greater social status. Meanwhile, Bronte's Heathcliff is described as a tall, athletic, well-formed man, beside whom my master seemed quite slender and youth-like. It looked intelligent and retained no marks of former degradation, blah, blah, blah. Where was I up to? Although Bronte's description is considerably described in much more depth when compared to that of Austen's Mr. Darcy, both, however, heavily outlined the beauty of the said characters, reinforcing the idea of romanticism within their novels. And then I've got some key passages of where those quotes are from, which I'll go back and talk in greater detail. It can also be argued that the issues of class is an integral element in the stories of Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights. This idea of class is used as an outlet for romance in both of the recognised novels, although through somewhat differing views. In one aspect, Austen's character Elizabeth Bennet is torn between choosing a man not based solely on his wealth, but rather on his manners and her affections for the man in question. Meanwhile, Bronte's character of Catherine is forced to choose between Heathcliff, the poor gypsy boy whom she once adored, or the elegant, wealthy Mr. Edgar, who can provide the lifestyle she so eagerly seeks. From this comparison, readers of both novels can see an evident shift in tones of romance and class between the 2 texts. Elizabeth has been characterized with the feminist movement in mind, having her own say in the matter of choosing a suitor, but which is based on her own romantic happiness rather than what others considered best for her. Opposing this idea, Catherine is characterized as being a victim of the patriarchy ideology, choosing a husband of great fortune over the boy she once loved. Believing he could never be what she needed. To her dismay, Heathcliff returns a wealthy man, causing her much strife. And then key passages there as well. So I'll go back to them and add more depth to those arguments. A key element of Romanticism, which Austen and Bronte both demonstrate, is the utilization of settings in their text. This idea of setting in the Romantic era included not only the physical structures within the text, but the weather, seasons, and the time of day as well. In Austen's text, there is a clear assumption that this is primarily set within an inviting setting, fitting the overall good-natured charm of the novel. For example, Pemberley is described as very large and contained great variety of ground. They entered it in one of its lowest points and drove for some time through a beautiful wood stretching over a wide extent. Austen makes great effort to glamorize the locations of her text to seize the romance for the readers. In comparison to Bronte's text, however, there is an ever-present emphasis on the cold and menacing surroundings in which Wuthering Heights is located. Bronte places stress on the harsh environment of Wuthering Heights. The architect had foresight to build it strong. The narrow windows are deeply set in the wall, and the corners defend with large jutting stones, encapsulating its Gothic nature. In doing so, Bronte has added an additional element of mystery to an already romantically rich novel. And then once again, there's some more key passages, so I can go back and add more to it. And there's my resources. So one of the ones that I really want to look more into was this one here, The Aesthetic Concepts of Beauty in Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. So to go back on the emphasis of beauty within the both of the texts, there was a lot of information in that one that I could gain a lot out of. And yeah, that was my one done.
Thanks, Lachlan. One of the big things I noticed while listening to that presentation is you're making all of these wonderful points, particularly about class, and your arguments were getting very complicated in the body of your thing. And I was thinking you were really maturing, and you might want to come back to your thesis statement, because your thesis statement wasn't quite as complicated as the body of your essay.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed, because I started yesterday on the actual essay itself, just to get myself a bit of a structure. And yeah, I was like, I need to change my thesis statement to something that matches into that. But I was kind of going off what you said in the video that you made about, like, you can come back to your thesis statement and make it more relevant.
Totally. I just mentioned that because I thought there was a lot of complexity and kind of interesting ideas in the body, and definitely come back to your thesis statement, because there's a lot going on there. And I do think also you might run out of words, because it sounds like you've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely one thing I'll have to take a look at.
That reading you mentioned is very interesting, because Emily Bronte has some very interesting ideas about aesthetics and beauty, because she doesn't have this conventional idea of like symmetrical beauty is like this wonderfully well-rounded kind of thing. Beauty can be kind of a very rugged thing. So that was great, Lachlan. I look forward to giving you feedback. It's 8:56 now. I know a few people need to hang around to ask questions. I really give you two options. If you haven't had the chance to present today, I think I think Taylor's going to do this, because I'm pretty sure Taylor's sick at the moment, but she's listening in. You can record your presentation and upload it to Collaborate, and I'll view it there if you would like to do that. Otherwise, we might just have a mini kind of presentation before our class begins on Wednesday and get them over and done with, because I don't want to hold you back too far, given the nature of this class being a late night class. So yeah, I don't think we'll have any more tonight. Sorry guys who didn't get to go, but I'm thinking Clara, Soleil, Taylor, I'm pretty sure we got through a fair few. I think we may have got through about 19 to 20. So there's only a few more to be done. yeah, the trouble is I didn't want to tell anyone to stop speaking at like the 4-minute mark, because that's just going to be extra kind of anxiety for them, and it'll also feel like, hey, I didn't really get to say my piece as well, which isn't a good thing. But yeah, does anyone have any questions? I know Kayla needs to discuss something, I'm pretty sure. Otherwise, yeah, I'll let you guys go and see you on Wednesday. I'll send out a universal email for everyone, so letting you know that you can present on Wednesday, or you can record your presentation and upload it to Collaborate with your actual presentation document. But for everyone, yeah, thanks for hanging in there, all of you guys that listened to them all. And I'll see you on Wednesday, and I'll start getting the feedback to you tomorrow as quick as possible.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Great work, everyone.
See ya.